26-year-old virgin entered the wrong room, slept with her boss, got pregnant, and now he... Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The Atlanta skyline glowed against the darkening February sky as Alexia Monroe rushed through the revolving doors of the Hilton downtown, her wheeled suitcase catching on the metal trim. Her chocolate-brown curls, usually contained in a neat, low bun, had started to escape after 15 hours of travel delays and corporate presentations. She pressed her fingers against her temples, fighting the headache that had been building since her connecting flight from Chicago. "Just need to get to my room," she whispered to herself, fishing out the key card from her blazer pocket. The lobby's elegant lighting seemed too bright, every click of her sensible heels against the marble floor echoing in her exhausted mind. Room 1542. The numbers blurred slightly as she blinked at the card. The elevator ride felt endless. Alexia leaned against the mirrored wall, studying her reflection. Her camel-colored pencil skirt and cream blouse still looked presentable, but her eyes told a different story. Those honey-brown eyes, usually bright and observant, now showed the weight of a day spent trying to disappear into boardroom walls while delivering quarterly projections. The corridor on the 15th floor stretched before her, thick carpet muffling her steps. 1538, 1540, 1542. Alexia slid the keycard into the slot, relief washing over her as the light turned green. She pushed the door open, wheeling her suitcase inside. The room was darker than expected, illuminated only by the city lights filtering through partially drawn curtains. Something felt off, but her tired mind couldn't quite process what. The air carried an unfamiliar scent, a masculine cologne that seemed to wrap around her senses. "I believe you're in the wrong room." The deep voice cut through the darkness like a blade. Alexia's heart stopped, then kicked into overdrive. A tall figure emerged from the shadows near the window, and the room's lights suddenly blazed to life. Caio Sebastian Wolf stood before her, his 6'3" frame commanding the space in a way that made the executive suite feel somehow smaller. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered, and he wore black tailored pants and a white dress shirt, with the sleeves rolled up to his elbows. But it was his eyes that held her frozen, steel gray, almost silver in the artificial light, studying her with an intensity that made her feel transparent. I'm so sorry," Alexia stammered, her fingers clutching the handle of her suitcase like a lifeline. "The key worked, I thought." "The hotel assigned the same room twice," he stated, his tone businesslike despite the unusual situation. "I noticed the error earlier and informed the front desk." He moved toward the room phone. "I'll call them now." "No, please," Alexia said quickly, already backing toward the door. "I'll go down myself. I'm so sorry for the intrusion, Mr. Wolf." His eyebrow arched slightly. "You know who I am." Of course she did. Everyone in the corporate world knew Caio Sebastian Wolf, the ruthless negotiator, who had transformed his family's New York law firm into a global consulting empire. She'd seen him from afar at conferences, watched his TED Talks, studied his business strategies. But nothing had prepared her for his presence in person, the way he seemed to bend reality around himself, like a gravitational force. "We attended the same conference in Chicago last month," she explained, her voice smaller than she intended. "I was part of the team presenting the Southeast market analysis." Something flickered in those silver eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Alexia Monroe, the projections specialist who challenged the board's assumptions about millennial spending patterns. She felt heat rise to her cheeks. She hadn't expected him to remember that moment, one of the rare times she'd found the courage to speak up in a room full of executives. "Yes, that was me." The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken tension. Caio took a step closer, and Alexia caught herself holding her breath. He smelled like expensive cologne and fresh rain, a dangerously appealing combination. "Your analysis was impressive," he said, his voice dropping slightly. It showed unusual insight into human behavior patterns. He was close enough now that she had to tilt her head back to meet his gaze. "Something tells me you see more than you let on, Ms. Monroe." The compliment wrapped around her like silk, but there was something else in his tone, a question perhaps, or a challenge. Alexia felt her carefully constructed professional walls wavering. She was used to being overlooked, to being the quiet observer in the room. But Caio Wolf was seeing her, really seeing her, and it was terrifying and thrilling in equal measure. "Thank you," she managed, proud that her voice remained steady. but I should really go sort out this room situation. Allow me to escort you to the front desk, he offered, reaching for his suit jacket. It's the least I can do considering they've inconvenienced you at this hour. That's not necessary. I insist. He held the door open, his expression leaving no room for argument. Besides, my word tends to carry some weight with hotel management. The elevator ride down was silent, charged with an awareness that made Alexia's skin tingle. She stole glances at his reflection in the mirrored walls, the sharp line of his jaw, the controlled power in his stance. Everything about him radiated discipline and authority, yet there was something else, something hidden beneath the surface that called to the part of her that always looked deeper. At the front desk, Kaio handled the situation with the same efficiency he probably used in million-dollar negotiations. Within minutes, Alexia had a new room, an upgraded suite on the 16th floor, and a profusely apologetic hotel manager. "Thank you," she said as they stood in the lobby, suddenly uncertain how to end this unexpected encounter. "You didn't have to do all this. Sometimes the universe makes mistakes that turn out not to be mistakes at all," he replied, those silver eyes holding hers for a moment too long. "Good night, Miss Monroe." Alexia watched him walk away, his tall figure cutting through the lobby with practiced ease. Only when he disappeared into the executive lounge did she let out the breath she'd been holding. In her new room, larger and more luxurious than she was used to, Alexia stood at the window, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. Her heart was still racing, her mind replaying every moment of the encounter. She had spent years building walls around herself, protecting her heart, choosing solitude over shallow connections. One chance meeting shouldn't be able to shake those foundations. But as she finally lay down to sleep, Alexia couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted in her carefully ordered world. Like the first tremor before an earthquake, invisible but irreversible. She closed her eyes, trying to push away thoughts of steel-gray eyes and the scent of rain. Little did she know, 16 floors below in the hotel's executive lounge, Kaio Sebastian Wolf sat with an untouched glass of scotch, his thoughts occupied by honey-brown eyes and quiet strength. For the first time in years, his carefully constructed world of control and precision felt somehow incomplete, as if he'd caught a glimpse of something genuine in a world of corporate facades, something that all his success and power couldn't give him. The night wrapped around them both, two souls unknowingly standing on the edge of a transformation neither had seen coming. Sometimes the biggest changes come not with grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in quiet moments, when guards are down and tired souls accidentally find each other in the dark. 3 weeks had passed since that fateful night at the Hilton downtown, but Alexia couldn't shake the memories. She sat at her desk in the Atlanta office, staring at spreadsheets that seemed to blur before her eyes. The morning sickness had started 2 days ago, but she'd dismissed it as stress. After all, it couldn't be. Earth to Alexia. Olivia Grace Bennett's voice cut through her thoughts. Her best friend perched on the edge of her desk, green eyes sparkling with concern. "You've been staring at that same cell for 10 minutes. Spill." Alexia glanced around the open-plan office, grateful that most of her colleagues were at lunch. "Not here, Liv. Fine. Grab your bag. We're getting smoothies." Olivia's tone left no room for argument, her blonde-brown hair swinging as she stood up decisively. 20 minutes later, they sat in a quiet corner of their favorite juice bar. Olivia, wearing ripped designer jeans and an oversized blazer that somehow looked both professional and effortlessly cool, studied her friend's face. "Okay, what's going on? You've been off since that business trip. Did something happen in Chicago?" Alexia wrapped her hands around her untouched ginger smoothie. "Atlanta, actually. After Chicago." She took a deep breath. "I met Kaio Wolf." "The Kaio Wolf? Ice King of Wall Street? Mr. Tall, Dark, and Terrifying?" Olivia leaned forward. "Define met." "I accidentally went into his hotel room." Alexia's voice dropped to a whisper. The key worked. There was a mix-up with the room assignments. And something happened. Alexia felt heat rise to her cheeks. Something I never planned. He was different than I expected. Gentle, almost. Like he saw past all my walls. Olivia's eyes widened. "Wait, are you saying what I think you're saying? You, Alexia Monroe, who once turned down Bachelor number 1 because his tie didn't match his socks?" "It wasn't like that," Alexia interrupted. "It was real, raw. Like for one night, we both stopped pretending to be who everyone expects us to be." She pushed her smoothie away, her stomach churning. "And now I think I'm pregnant." The words hung in the air between them. Olivia reached across the table, squeezing her friend's hand. "Have you taken a test?" 3. All positive. Alexia's voice trembled. I don't know what to do, Liv. He's Kyle Wolf. He probably doesn't even remember that night. That's bullshit and you know it. Olivia's voice was firm but gentle. The way you described it, that's not something a person forgets. Have you tried to contact him? How? Send an email to his corporate office. Dear Mr. Wolf, remember that night in Atlanta? Surprise. Alexia laughed bitterly. He lives in a different world, Liv. A world of power lunches and billion-dollar deals. You're just the brilliant analyst who's been running circles around your department for the past 3 years. Olivia cut in. The woman who single-handedly restructured the Southeast market strategy. Don't you dare minimize yourself. Before Alexia could respond, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and the blood drained from her face. What? Olivia asked. There's an all-hands meeting this afternoon. The New York executive team is flying in for a major announcement. Alexia's hands shook slightly, including Kyle Wolf. The office was buzzing with nervous energy when they returned. Alexia sat through 2 hours of mind-numbing presentations, barely registering the words. And then he walked in. Kyle commanded the room without effort, his dark suit impeccably tailored, his presence making the large conference room feel somehow smaller. His silver-grey eyes swept the crowd, and for a fraction of a second, they locked with hers. Something flickered in their depths. Recognition, surprise, something more. The merger will be finalized by the end of the quarter, he was saying, his deep voice carrying to every corner. I'll be personally overseeing the transition from the Atlanta office over the next few months. Alexia felt the room spin slightly. Months. He would be here for months. After the meeting, she tried to slip out quietly, but his voice stopped her. Ms. Monroe, a moment! Her heart thundered as colleagues filed past, leaving them alone in the conference room. Kaio stood by the window, the late afternoon sun casting his profile in sharp relief. I trust you found your room satisfactory that night. His tone was professional, but there was an undercurrent of something else. Yes, thank you. Alexia forced herself to meet his gaze. Mr. Wolf, Kaio, he corrected softly. I think we're past formalities, don't you? The tenderness in his voice, so different from his corporate persona, made her breath catch. Kaio, I need to tell you something. He took a step closer, and suddenly she was back in that hotel room, surrounded by his presence, his scent, the invisible pull between them. I've thought about you, he admitted, his voice low. More than I should. I'm pregnant. The words fell between them like stones in still water. Alexia watched his face, waiting for the shock, the denial, the rapid retreat she'd imagined 1,000 times. Instead, Kaio was absolutely still, his silver eyes studying her face with an intensity that made her want to look away. But she held his gaze, chin lifted slightly, refusing to apologize for the truth. You're certain? His voice was carefully controlled. Yes. He moved to the conference room door and locked it, then returned to stand before her. Tell me what you want, Alexia, not what you think I want to hear. What do you want? The question caught her off guard. In all her scenarios, she hadn't expected him to ask about her wishes. I want to keep the baby, she said softly, but I don't expect anything from you. I can handle this on my own. No. You don't have to handle this on your own. Kaio ran a hand through his dark hair, the first sign of genuine emotion she'd seen from him in the corporate setting. I know my reputation. I know what people say about me, but I'm not the kind of man who walks away from his responsibilities. More than that, he paused, choosing his words carefully. More than that, I'm not the kind of man who can forget a night like that. Who can forget you? Tears pricked at Alexia's eyes, but she blinked them back. This isn't just about responsibility, Kaio. This is a child. A life, it changes everything. Then let it change everything. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of darker gray in his eyes. That night, you saw me. Not the corporate shark, not the wolf heir, just me. No one's done that in a very long time. A knock at the door made them both jump. Mr. Wolf, the video conference with Tokyo is in 5 minutes. A moment, he called out, then turned back to Alexia. Have dinner with me tonight. We need to talk. Really talk. Alexia hesitated. I don't know if that's a good idea. Probably not, he agreed, a hint of a smile softening his features. But I think we're past good ideas, don't you? She found herself nodding, and he quickly wrote down an address on a business card. 8 o'clock. It's a private restaurant. No corporate eyes, no expectations. Just us. As Alexia walked back to her desk on shaky legs, she passed Olivia, who raised an eyebrow in silent question. I'm having dinner with him tonight, she whispered. Holy shit, Olivia mouthed, then grabbed her arm. You're coming to my place first. No way are you wearing anything from your current wardrobe for this conversation. Later, as Alexia stood in Olivia's bedroom surrounded by discarded outfit options, her friend stopped fussing with clothes and pulled her into a tight hug. Whatever happens tonight, you've got this. And you've got me, always. Alexia hugged her back, grateful for the unconditional support. What if this is all a huge mistake? The biggest changes in life usually look like mistakes at first, Olivia said wisely. Sometimes you have to let go of the life you plan to make room for the life that's waiting for you. As the sun set over Atlanta, Alexia looked at herself in the mirror. She wore a simple black dress that somehow made her look both elegant and approachable, her curls falling freely around her shoulders. For once, she didn't feel the need to hide or minimize herself. Whatever happened tonight would change everything. But maybe, just maybe, that was exactly what both she and Kaio needed. A chance to break free from the careful boxes they'd built around themselves and discover who they could be together. The restaurant was hidden away in a renovated brownstone in Atlanta's historic district. Alexia stepped out of her Uber, her heart racing as she took in the understated elegance of the building. No sign marked its entrance, just a simple brass number on a dark blue door. Before she could reach for the handle, the door opened. Kaio stood there and Alexia's breath caught. He'd changed from his corporate armor into dark jeans and a charcoal cashmere sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and more devastatingly attractive. "You look beautiful," he said softly, his silver eyes taking in her appearance with an intensity that made her skin tingle. "Thank you." She followed him inside, where a discreet host led them through the intimate space. The restaurant was clearly exclusive. Only 5 tables occupied the main floor, each separated by clever architectural details that created perfect privacy. But Kaio guided her past these, up a narrow staircase to a private dining room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a hidden garden. A single table was set with fine china and crystal, soft lighting creating an intimate atmosphere. "I hope this is okay," he said, pulling out her chair. "I thought we needed somewhere we could really talk." "It's perfect," Alexia replied, trying to calm her nerves. Up close, she could smell his cologne, that same intoxicating scent from the hotel room that had haunted her dreams. A sommelier appeared, and Kaio ordered sparkling water for both of them without hesitation. The gesture, his immediate consideration for her condition, touched something deep inside her. "How are you feeling?" he asked once they were alone, his tone gentle. "Any morning sickness?" "Some," she admitted, "though it seems to hit more in the afternoon. I've been living on ginger tea and crackers." "Have you seen a doctor yet?" She shook her head. "I have an appointment next week. I only confirmed it with home tests a few days ago." Kaio's hands tightened slightly on his water glass. "I'd like to be there, at the appointment, if you'll let me." The vulnerability in his voice, so different from his corporate persona, made Alexia look up sharply. "You don't have to—" "Please stop telling me what I don't have to do," he interrupted, but his tone was soft. "I want to be involved, Alexia. Not out of obligation, but because—" He paused, seeming to struggle with words for the first time since she'd met him. "Because that night meant something. You meant something." The chef arrived then, presenting a tasting menu that had clearly been planned with pregnancy restrictions in mind. Each dish was a work of art, but Alexia barely tasted them. She was too caught up in the man across from her, who seemed to be slowly letting his carefully constructed walls crumble. "Tell me about your family," she said between courses, wanting to understand him better. A shadow crossed his face. "Not much to tell. My parents are corporate lawyers in New York. Success was the only acceptable outcome in our household. Emotions were seen as inefficient." "That sounds lonely." It was. He met her eyes. "Until that night in the hotel, I thought that's just how life was. Controlled, calculated. Then you walked in and suddenly everything I thought I knew about myself came into question." "What do you mean?" Kaio was quiet for a moment, swirling water in his crystal glass. "I've been with women before, beautiful, accomplished women who made perfect sense on paper. But with you, it was different, raw, real. For the first time in my life, I wasn't thinking about consequences or appearances. I was just feeling." "I know what you mean," Alexia said softly. "I've spent so long being careful, building walls, protecting myself. But that night," she took a shaky breath, "it was like all my defenses meant nothing, like you saw right through them." "You were virgin," he said quietly. It wasn't a question. "Yes." She lifted her chin slightly, refusing to be embarrassed. "I was waiting. Not for marriage necessarily, but for something real, something that mattered. Kaio reached across the table, taking her hand. His touch sent electricity through her veins. It mattered, Alexia, more than I think either of us realized at the time. The dessert arrived, a delicate chocolate creation that the chef described in detail, but Alexia barely heard him. She was too focused on Kaio's thumb drawing small circles on her palm, each touch sending shivers up her arm. "I need you to understand something," Kaio said, once they were alone again. "I'm not good at this, at emotions, at vulnerability. I've never had to be, but I want to try. For you, for our child. Our child." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "I'm scared," Alexia admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not just of the pregnancy, but of everything. My career, my independence, my heart." "I would never ask you to give up your career," Kaio said firmly. "You're brilliant at what you do. I've read your market analyses. They're innovative, insightful. That's part of what drew me to you that night. The way your mind works, the way you see patterns others miss. But the company will adapt. I'm not just on the board. I'm the majority shareholder. If anyone has an issue with our situation, they can take it up with me." "That's exactly what I'm afraid of," Alexia said, pulling her hand back. "I don't want to be seen as someone who slept her way to protection. I've worked too hard to build my reputation." Kaio's expression softened. "Then we do this your way. We keep things private for now. I'll make sure the merger transition team has no direct overlap with your department. You keep doing your job exactly as you have been. And us, what are we? We're—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "We're two people who shared something profound, who are about to share something even more profound. I don't want to put labels on this, Alexia. I want to get to know you, really know you. Not just as the mother of my child, but as the woman who made me feel something I thought I'd buried decades ago." Tears pricked at Alexia's eyes. Damn pregnancy hormones. "And what was that?" "Hope," he said simply. "Hope that maybe there's more to life than boardrooms and balance sheets, that maybe real connection isn't a weakness after all." A soft breeze drifted in through the partially open window, carrying the scent of jasmine from the garden below. In that moment, looking into Kaio's silver eyes, Alexia felt something shift inside her. The walls she'd built so carefully began to crack, letting in something warm and dangerous and thrilling. "I have conditions," she said, straightening her spine. A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "I would expect nothing less from you, Ms. Monroe." "Name them." "First, we take this slow. The pregnancy doesn't mean we have to rush everything else." He nodded. "Agreed. Second, I keep my apartment, my independence, no matter what happens between us." "Of course." "And third," she took a deep breath, "you have to be real with me. Always. No corporate masks, no power plays, just you." Kaio was quiet for a long moment, his silver eyes intense. "That last one, it won't be easy for me. Being vulnerable doesn't come naturally. I know. It's not easy for me either." Alexia reached across the table, taking his hand this time. "But I think that's what makes this worth trying. We both understand the cost of letting those walls down." He interlaced his fingers with hers, and the simple gesture felt more intimate than any kiss. Then we learned together, day by day. As they left the restaurant later that night, the Atlanta streets quiet and star-filled, Kaio helped her into a waiting car. But before he closed the door, he hesitated. "Alexia, yes? Thank you. For giving me a chance to be more than what everyone expects me to be." She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, when I was trying so hard to be invisible." The car pulled away, leaving Kaio standing in the soft streetlight. In her rearview mirror, Alexia watched his tall figure grow smaller, but she could still feel the warmth of his hand in hers, the echo of his words in her heart. Neither of them had said the word love. It was too soon, too fragile for such declarations. But as Alexia placed a hand on her still flat stomach, she felt a certainty she couldn't explain. Whatever was growing between them, both literally and figuratively, had the potential to be something extraordinary. All they had to do was be brave enough to let it happen. The morning light filtered through the windows of Atlanta Women's Health Center as Alexia sat in the waiting room, her fingers nervously smoothing non-existent wrinkles from her navy dress. The door chimed, and her heart skipped as Kaio walked in, somehow managing to make even this ordinary medical office feel like an executive boardroom in his perfectly tailored gray suit. Several heads turned, but he had eyes only for her. "Am I late?" he asked softly, taking the seat beside her. "No, right on time." She couldn't help but notice how he angled his body toward her, creating an intimate bubble in the public space. "You didn't have to leave your morning meetings." "Stop," he said gently. "There's nowhere else I need to be right now." Before she could respond, a nurse called her name. As they followed her down the corridor, Kaio's hand found the small of Alexia's back, a gesture so natural, yet so profound, it made her breath catch. The examination room was standard-issue medical, all cool whites and sterile equipment, but somehow Kaio's presence made it feel different. He stood slightly apart as the nurse took Alexia's vitals, but his silver eyes never left her face. Dr. Lauren Miller entered with a warm smile, her salt-and-pepper hair pulled back in a neat bun. "Alexia Monroe?" She glanced between them, professional enough not to react to Kaio's obvious corporate status. "And you must be the father?" "Kaio Wolf," he said simply, moving closer to Alexia's side. The next 30 minutes were a blur of questions, examinations, and explanations. But what Alexia would remember most clearly was Kaio's face when the doctor turned on the ultrasound machine and a rapid whooshing filled the room. "That's your baby's heartbeat," Dr. Miller said, moving the wand slightly. "Strong and steady, right where we want it to be at 8 weeks." Alexia felt tears slip down her cheeks as she stared at the tiny flickering light on the screen. Then she felt Kaio's hand close around hers, and when she looked up, she saw something she never expected, moisture in those steel-gray eyes. "Would you like a picture?" Dr. Miller asked, already printing several copies. "Yes," they said in unison, then shared a look that made the doctor smile knowingly. Later, in the parking lot, Kaio helped Alexia into his car despite her protests that she could drive herself. "You're coming to my place," he said, his tone brooking no argument. "We need to talk about the care instructions Dr. Miller gave us, and I had my chef prepare lunch." "You have a chef? For special occasions?" He glanced at her as he navigated through midday traffic. "This qualifies." His penthouse in Buckhead took up the entire top floor of a sleek high-rise, but what struck Alexia wasn't the obvious luxury. It was how unlived-in it felt, like a perfect stage set, waiting for real life to begin. "The kitchen's through here," Kaio said, leading her past modern art pieces that probably cost more than her annual salary. The kitchen, however, was warm and inviting, with copper pots hanging from a rack and sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. A small table was set for two, laden with what looked like a gourmet version of comfort food: golden chicken soup, fresh bread, and a colorful salad. "You told your chef I've been having trouble keeping food down," Alexia realized, touched by the thoughtfulness. "I did some research," he admitted, pulling out her chair. "Apparently clear broths and simple proteins are best for morning sickness, though in your case it's more afternoon sickness." They ate in comfortable silence for a while, the Atlanta skyline spreading out before them. Finally, Kaio spoke. "Move in with me." Alexia nearly choked on her soup. "What?" "Not immediately," he clarified quickly, "but soon. This place has 5 bedrooms. A proper nursery could be set up, and you'd be closer to the office." "Kaio," she interrupted gently, "we talked about this. Taking things slow, remember? Maintaining my independence." He ran a hand through his dark hair, a gesture she was beginning to recognize as a sign of genuine emotion breaking through his controlled exterior. "I know, I want to be there, for everything. Every morning of sickness, every craving, every moment. And you can be," she said softly, "but not by rushing into living together. We barely know each other outside of work, and that night, then let me know you." He reached across the table, taking her hand. "Have dinner with me again, not at a restaurant. Here, I'll cook." "You cook?" A smile tugged at his lips. "There's a lot you don't know about me, Alexia Monroe. My mother might have been emotionally distant, but our housekeeper, Rosa, practically raised me. She taught me that food is love in its purest form." The simple admission, this glimpse into his childhood, moved her more than any grand gesture could have. "Okay," she said. "Dinner. But not tonight. I promised Olivia I'd fill her in on the appointment." "Ah yes, the protective best friend." His tone was amused. "Should I be worried?" "Probably," Alexia laughed. "She's already planning ways to make your life miserable if you hurt me." "Smart woman." His expression grew serious. "I don't intend to hurt you, Alexia." "I know," she said softly, "but intentions aren't always enough." They stood at his door later, neither quite ready to say goodbye. Kaio reached out, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. The gesture was so tender it made her heart ache. "Tomorrow night?" he asked. "For dinner?" "Tomorrow night," she agreed. Back at her own apartment, Alexia found Olivia waiting with takeout and demanding eyes. "Spill everything. Now." Over pad thai and spring rolls, Alexia recounted the appointment, then pulled out the ultrasound picture. Olivia squealed appropriately, then grew serious. "And Kaio? How's he handling all this?" "Surprisingly well, almost too well." Alexia picked at her food. "He asked me to move in with him." "Whoa!" Olivia sat up straighter. "That's fast." "I said no. We agreed to take things slow." But, Alexia sighed. "There are moments when he looks at me, or touches me, and it feels like the most natural thing in the world, like we've known each other forever, instead of weeks. That's called chemistry, honey." Olivia took a sip of her tea. "The question is, are you ready to risk your heart on it?" "I think," Alexia said slowly, "I think it might be too late to protect my heart. Not with the baby, and not with him." The next day at work was a study in careful distance. They passed each other in the hallway once. Kaio in full corporate mode, surrounded by executives, Alexia heading to a team meeting. Their eyes met briefly, and the electricity between them was almost visible. That evening, as Alexia stood in front of her closet, trying to decide what to wear for dinner, her phone buzzed with a text from Kaio. "Wear something comfortable. No corporate armor tonight. Just us." The message made her smile. She chose a soft sweater dress in deep purple, leaving her curls free around her shoulders. When she arrived at his penthouse, the scent of garlic and herbs filled the air, and Kaio greeted her in jeans and a black Henley, barefoot on the hardwood floors. The sight of him so casual, so unguarded, did something to her insides that had nothing to do with pregnancy hormones. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi," he replied, drawing her inside. "Welcome to cooking lesson number 1. I'm cooking. We're cooking. Together." He led her to the kitchen where ingredients were laid out like artwork. Rosa always said that cooking together is the best way to learn someone's rhythm. As they chopped and stirred and tasted, moving around each other in the large kitchen, Alexia understood what he meant. It was like a dance, this give and take, this learning of each other's spaces and movements. When Kaio reached around her to adjust the heat on a pan, his chest pressing against her back, she felt the now familiar spark between them ignite. But this time, instead of pulling away, she leaned into it slightly. His breath caught, and his free hand settled on her hip. "Alexia," he murmured, his lips close to her ear. "The sauce is going to burn," she whispered back. He chuckled, the sound rich and warm, but moved away to stir the pan. The moment stretched between them, full of promise and possibility. Later, as they ate the pasta they'd created together, Alexia realized something important. They were learning each other, slowly but surely, in all the ways that mattered. Not through grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but through small moments. The way he remembered her tea preference, the way she could read his micro-expressions, the way they moved together in the kitchen like they'd been doing it for years. Maybe that was what real love looked like. Not a sudden explosion, but a careful building of trust and understanding, brick by brick, moment by moment. 3 weeks had passed since their first cooking lesson, and Alexia found herself settling into a new rhythm with Kaio. Their private moments were filled with quiet intimacy, dinners at his penthouse, weekend brunches, long conversations about everything and nothing. But at work, they maintained their careful distance, a dance of professional detachment that was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. That morning, however, everything changed. Alexia sat in her morning team meeting, trying to focus on quarterly projections while fighting another wave of nausea, when her phone buzzed with an incoming email. The subject line made her blood run cold. "Wolf airs secret romance with junior analyst." Her hands trembling, she opened the email to find a link to a gossip blog. There, in high-resolution detail, were photos of her and Kaio, entering his building, sharing intimate dinners by his penthouse windows, even one of him helping her into his car after the doctor's appointment. The article was filled with speculation about their relationship, her role in the company, and thinly veiled implications about how she'd advanced her career. "Alexia," her manager's voice cut through her panic. "Are you okay? You look pale." "I'm fine," she managed, but her voice sounded distant to her own ears. "Just need some air." She barely made it to the bathroom before emptying her stomach. As she sat on the cool tile floor, her phone buzzed again, this time with a text from Olivia. "My office now, back entrance." Somehow she made it to Olivia's corner office in the marketing department without being seen. Her friend was waiting with ginger tea and a fierce expression. "Have you seen it?" Alexia asked, collapsing onto Olivia's couch. Yes, PR is already in damage control mode. Olivia sat beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. But honey, that's not what I'm worried about. How are you? Alexia's voice broke. Everything was just starting to feel real. Good. And now, a knock at the door made them both jump. But it was only Kaio's executive assistant, Madison. Ms. Monroe? Mr. Wolf needs to see you immediately in the executive conference room. Madison's expression was sympathetic. There's a private elevator access to avoid the main office areas. The executive floor was eerily quiet when Alexia arrived. Through the glass walls of the conference room, she could see Kaio standing with several men in expensive suits. Members of the board, she realized, with a sinking feeling. Kaio's face was a mask of corporate control, but his eyes softened slightly when he saw her. Alexia, please come in. The board members studied her with varying degrees of judgment and curiosity. William Harrison, the eldest board member, spoke first. Ms. Monroe, I trust you understand the delicacy of this situation. With all due respect, Kaio interrupted, his voice carrying that quiet authority that could silence a room. This meeting isn't about judgment. It's about strategy. Strategy? Harrison's eyebrows rose. Kaio, you're the face of this company. Your relationship with a junior employee. My relationship, Kaio cut in, each word precise and sharp, is not up for discussion. What is up for discussion is how we're going to handle the clear breach of privacy that occurred. The optics, another board member began. The optics, Kaio's voice dropped dangerously, are that someone had me followed, had photos taken through my private windows, invaded not just my privacy, but that of someone I care about, someone carrying my child. The room went deadly silent. Alexia's heart thundered in her chest as she watched the board members process this new information. You're pregnant? Harrison asked, looking at Alexia directly for the first time. Yes. She lifted her chin, channeling some of Kaio's quiet strength. 12 weeks. This changes everything, one of the younger board members muttered. No, Kaio said firmly. This changes nothing about her capabilities, her contributions to this company, or her right to privacy. He moved to stand beside Alexia, not quite touching her, but close enough that she could feel his protective energy. What it does change is how aggressively we're going to pursue whoever leaked those photos. The next hour was a blur of legal discussions and PR strategies. Through it all, Kaio remained a steady presence beside her, his occasional glances carrying messages only she could read. Are you okay? I'm here. We'll get through this. Finally, when the last board member had left, Kaio closed the conference room door and turned to her. In an instant, his corporate mask crumbled. I'm so sorry, he said softly, pulling her into his arms. I should have been more careful, should have known we were being watched. Alexia buried her face in his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. What happens now? Now, he pulled back slightly to look at her. We stop hiding. Not because they forced our hand, but because I'm tired of pretending I don't light up every time you walk into a room. Kaio, listen to me. He cupped her face in his hands. I know this isn't how we plan to handle things. I know you wanted to keep your professional reputation separate from us, but maybe this is an opportunity. An opportunity for what? To be honest, about everything. His silver eyes were intense. Move in with me, Alexia. Not because of the publicity, not because of the baby, but because I can't stand watching you leave every night, because my place doesn't feel like home until you're in it. People will talk, she whispered. They'll say, let them talk. He brushed his thumb across her cheek. They'll see what I see eventually. A brilliant woman who challenges me, who makes me better, who's carrying our child and still running circles around her department's projections. A knock at the door interrupted them. Madison entered with a concerned expression. Sir, your mother is on line 1 and she's not happy. Kaio's jaw tightened. Tell her I'll call her back. She says she's getting on a plane. She and your father will be here by tonight. Alexia felt Kaio tense beside her. In all their conversations about family, he'd never gone into detail about his relationship with his parents, but his reaction now told her everything she needed to know. Book them a hotel, he said firmly. Not my penthouse. After Madison left, Alexia touched his arm gently. Do you want me to be there? When they arrive? No, he said quickly, then softened. Not yet. Let me handle them first. They're complicated. You mean they won't approve? Their approval stopped mattering to me a long time ago. He pulled her close again. But I won't let them upset you. Not in your condition. I'm pregnant, not fragile, she reminded him, but smiled at his protectiveness. I know, you're the strongest person I know. He pressed a kiss to her forehead. Go home. Pack what you need for tonight. Stay with me. Kayo, just for tonight, he added quickly. We can figure out the rest later. But after today, I need you close. Looking into his eyes, Alexia saw what he wasn't saying. His fear of losing her, his need to protect her, his growing feelings that neither of them had put into words yet. Okay, she said softly. Tonight. Later. As she packed an overnight bag in her apartment, Olivia perched on her bed offering commentary. You know, this changes everything, right? Everything was already changing, Alexia replied, folding a sweater. This just accelerated things. Are you ready for that? For his world? His family? Alexia paused, thinking about the look in Kayo's eyes when he defended her to the board. I'm ready to try. For him. For us. Olivia studied her friend's face, then smiled. You're in love with him, aren't you? Alexia touched her slightly rounded stomach. I think I might be. Good, Olivia said firmly. Because that man is definitely in love with you. Has been since that first night, if you ask me. As thunder rolled in the distance, promising an Atlanta summer storm, Alexia looked out her window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Kayo was preparing to face his parents, to defend their relationship, to fight for what was growing between them. She placed a hand on her stomach, feeling the first flutter of movement, too early to be the baby, but something else. Hope, maybe, or courage. Whatever storms were coming, they would face them together. Thunder crashed outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of Kayo's penthouse as Alexia curled up on his leather couch, watching Atlanta disappear behind sheets of rain. She'd changed into one of his soft sweaters, the expensive cashmere falling nearly to her knees, making her feel both protected and somehow more vulnerable. The door opened, and Kayo strode in, his hair damp from the rain, his expression stormy. He stopped when he saw her, something in his face softening. You're still here, he said quietly, as if he'd half expected her to vanish. Of course I am. She stood, studying his tense features. How did it go with your parents? He loosened his tie with sharp movements. About as well as expected. They're displeased. Displeased enough to take another meeting at 9 p.m.? She gestured to his suit. That wasn't a meeting. His jaw tightened. That was my mother attempting to arrange a marriage with the daughter of her oldest friend. Apparently the timing is perfect given the current scandal. Alexia felt her heart constrict. Oh, hey? He crossed the room in 3 long strides, taking her face in his hands. Look at me. That's not happening. Ever. Your parents clearly have expectations. Their expectations stopped mattering the moment I met you. His silver eyes were fierce. Do you want to know what I told them? She nodded, unable to look away from his intense gaze. I told them that for the first time in my life, I understand what it means to want something, someone, for reasons that have nothing to do with business or legacy or social standing. His thumbs traced her cheekbones. I told them that you challenge me, surprise me, make me question everything I thought I knew about myself, that you're brilliant and beautiful and carrying our child, and if they can't accept that, they can stay in New York. Tears spilled down Alexia's cheeks. Damn pregnancy hormones. What did they say? My father stormed out. My mother... A ghost of a smile touched his lips. My mother actually looked at me. Really looked at me. Maybe for the first time since I was a child. And she asked to meet you. What? Alexia stepped back, panic rising. No, Kayo, I can't. Yes, you can. He caught her hands. Because you're stronger than you know. Because I'll be right there with you. And because... He took a deep breath. Because I love you. The words hung in the air between them, raw and real and impossible to take back. Alexia's heart thundered in her chest. You don't have to say it back, he added quickly. I know it's fast, and with everything happening... She silenced him with a kiss, rising on her tiptoes to press her lips to his. He responded immediately, wrapping his arms around her waist and pulling her close, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. I love you too, she whispered against his mouth. I think I have since that night in the hotel, when you looked at me like you could see straight through every wall I'd ever built. He rested his forehead against hers, their breath mingling. Stay with me tonight? I'm already wearing your sweater, she pointed out with a small smile. I mean stay, not just tonight. His voice was rough with emotion. Move in with me, Alexia. Let me wake up to you every morning. Let me take care of you and our baby. Let me love you the way you deserve to be loved. Before she could respond, a sharp knock at the door made them both tense. Kayo's expression darkened as he checked his phone. It's my mother. She's early. He looked at Alexia. "You don't have to do this now." "Yes, I do." She squared her shoulders, though she kept his sweater on like armor. Let her in. Eleanor Wolfe was everything Alexia had imagined, and nothing she expected. Tall and elegant in a designer suit, her silver-streaked dark hair swept into a perfect chignon, she carried herself with the same natural authority as her son. But there was something else in her grey eyes, something almost vulnerable as she looked between Caio and Alexia. "So," Eleanor said after a long moment, "you're the woman who's made my son forget everything we taught him about suitable matches." "Mother," Caio's voice held a warning. "Let me finish, Caio." Eleanor moved further into the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors. "You're the woman who made him stand up to the board today, who made him tell me for the first time in his adult life that his happiness matters more than the family legacy." She stopped in front of Alexia. "You're carrying my grandchild?" "Yes," Alexia said, lifting her chin. "I am. And do you love my son? Not his name, not his position, not his money." "Mother, that's enough." "I love him," Alexia interrupted, her voice steady. "I love the way he makes coffee in the morning. Too strong and with too much sugar. I love how he can silence a room with just his presence, but gets nervous when he has to cook something new. I love that he's learning to be vulnerable, to let someone in, even though it terrifies him." She took a deep breath. "I love him for who he is, Mrs. Wolfe, not what he owns, and I'm not asking for your approval, but I hope someday you'll understand that your son deserves to be loved for himself, not for his legacy." Eleanor was silent for a long moment, studying Alexia with those penetrating grey eyes, so like her son's. Then, to both Alexia and Caio's shock, she smiled. "Well," she said softly, "perhaps I was wrong about suitable matches." She turned to Caio. "Your father will take longer to convince. But for what it's worth, I think you've found something rare, my son. Don't let anyone take it from you, not even us." After Eleanor left, Caio pulled Alexia into his arms, burying his face in her curls. "I've never seen my mother back down like that, not once in my entire life. Maybe she just needed to see that you could be happy without following their plan. Maybe." He pulled back to look at her. "You were incredible, you know that? Standing up to her, defending us." "I meant every word." She touched his face gently. "And yes, I'll move in with you." She smiled at his surprised expression. "You're right. It's time to stop hiding. From your family, from the press, from our feelings. I love you, Caio Wolfe, and I'm tired of pretending I don't want to fall asleep in your arms every night." His kiss was fierce and tender all at once, full of promises and possibilities. When they finally broke apart, the storm outside had passed, leaving the Atlanta skyline glittering like stars. "I should warn you," Caio said, his silver eyes dancing with unexpected humor. "I'm terrible at sharing closet space." Alexia laughed, the sound bright and free. "Good thing you have 5 bedrooms worth of closets then." As they stood together looking out at the city, Alexia felt their baby flutter. A real movement this time, tiny but unmistakable. She guided Caio's hand to the spot, watching his face transform with wonder. "I feel it," he whispered, or replacing his usual corporate control. That's our baby." "Our baby," she echoed, leaning into him. "Our home, our life, our love story," he added softly. "Not the one anyone expected, but the one we chose." Outside, the last rumbles of thunder faded away, leaving behind a sky washed clean and new. Like their love, Alexia thought. Unexpected, powerful, and all the more beautiful for having weathered its first storm. Morning light painted golden streaks across Caio's, their bedroom, as Alexia stood in front of the floor-length mirror, studying her reflection. At 16 weeks pregnant, her bump was becoming unmistakable, straining slightly against the fabric of her cream silk blouse. "You're beautiful," Caio's voice came from the doorway. He was already dressed for the office in a charcoal suit, but his eyes were soft as he watched her. "I'm not sure any of my work clothes will fit much longer," she sighed, smoothing the fabric. "Then we'll get you new ones." He crossed the room, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands resting on her growing belly. "Or you could just wear my sweaters forever. I'm quite fond of that look." She laughed, leaning back against his chest. The past month of living together had revealed new sides of Caio. Tender moments like this when his corporate mask fell away completely, showing the man who loved to hold her while they slept, who talked to their baby in the evenings, who seemed to find endless excuses to touch her. But it had also brought new challenges. "The board meeting is today," she reminded him, tension creeping back into her shoulders. "I know." His reflection met hers in the mirror. And you're going to be brilliant, just like you always are. Since the news of their relationship had broken, Alexia had insisted on maintaining her professional independence. Today would be her first major presentation to the board since moving in with Kaio, a comprehensive analysis of market trends that could reshape their entire Southeast strategy. What if they only see me as your pregnant girlfriend? The fear that had been gnawing at her finally surfaced. What if everything I've worked for? Stop. Kaio turned her gently to face him. You earned this presentation. Your analysis is revolutionary. That's why you're presenting it, not your team lead. The board needs to hear this directly from the person who saw the patterns everyone else missed. A knock at their bedroom door interrupted them. Mr. Wolf, the car is ready, Madison called out. We'll take separate cars, Alexia said firmly. At Kaio's slight frown, she added, Please, I need to do this my way. He nodded, understanding in his silver eyes. I love you, he said softly, kissing her forehead. Show them what you showed me in Chicago, that quiet brilliance that changes everything. An hour later, Alexia stood in the women's restroom at the office, fighting morning sickness that had decided to make an afternoon appearance. The door opened, and Olivia rushed in. I brought crackers and ginger tea, her friend announced, pulling supplies from her designer bag. And backup makeup in case you need touch-ups before the presentation. You're a lifesaver. Alexia accepted the tea gratefully. How did you know? Please, you think I haven't memorized your nausea schedule? Olivia hopped onto the counter, studying her friend. Plus, Madison texted me. Kaio's assistant is reporting to you now. We have a deal. I keep her updated on your lunch breaks. She keeps me posted on your morning sickness. We're like your personal protection squad. Olivia's expression softened. He really loves you, you know. The whole office sees it. The way his eyes follow you in meetings. How he has to stop himself from reaching for you in the hallways. I know. Alexia smiled, remembering how she'd woken up that morning to find Kaio had already prepared her tea and crackers, leaving them on her nightstand with a note, Conquer them all today, my love. Then, stop worrying about the board seeing you as just his girlfriend. Show them why he fell in love with you in the first place, that fierce intelligence that doesn't back down. Strengthened by Olivia's words and the settling effects of the tea, Alexia made her way to the boardroom. She passed Kaio in the hallway, a professional nod their only acknowledgement, though his eyes held volumes of love and pride. The presentation started smoothly. Alexia moved through her analysis with practiced precision, her voice steady as she outlined the market shifts she'd identified. But when she reached her most controversial conclusion, that they needed to completely restructure their approach to millennial investors, she saw several board members shift uncomfortably. Ms. Monroe, Harrison interrupted, while your analysis is interesting, it contradicts decades of established investment patterns. With respect, Mr. Harrison, that's exactly my point. Alexia met his gaze steadily. We're using outdated models to predict the behavior of a generation that operates fundamentally differently than their predecessors. And you believe you understand this generation better than our experienced analysts? I believe the data speaks for itself. She pulled up a new slide, displaying complex pattern analysis. These trends aren't theoretical. They're happening right now, under our noses. If we don't adapt, we'll lose an entire generation of potential clients. She's right. Kaio's voice was quiet, but carried authority. Look at the probability matrices on page 7. The pattern correlation is undeniable. Of course you'd support her analysis, another board member muttered. The room went silent. Alexia felt heat rise to her cheeks, but before she could respond, an unexpected voice spoke up. I've reviewed Ms. Monroe's work extensively, Eleanor Wolf said from the doorway. Everyone turned, surprised to see Kaio's mother at an Atlanta board meeting. Her methodology is impeccable, her conclusions backed by solid data. If you're dismissing her analysis because of her personal life, you're doing this company a grave disservice. Eleanor moved into the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. I flew down specifically to discuss this presentation, because what Ms. Monroe has identified could revolutionize our entire approach to modern investors. She fixed Harrison with a steely gaze. Unless, of course, you're comfortable watching our millennial client base migrate to more adaptive firms. The next hour was intense but productive. With Eleanor's support, Alexia's recommendations were given serious consideration. By the end, even Harrison was grudgingly acknowledging the validity of her analysis. After the meeting, Eleanor caught Alexia's arm. Walk with me. They ended up in the executive lounge where Eleanor ordered tea for both of them. Ginger, she specified to the server. My daughter-in-law needs it for the baby. Alexia's eyes widened at the term. Eleanor smiled slightly. Is that not accurate? We haven't... That is, Kaio hasn't... He will. Eleanor's expression softened. I know, my son. The way he looks at you, I've never seen him so sure of anything. She paused, stirring her tea. I owe you an apology, Alexia. I judged you unfairly at first. You were protecting your son. No, I was protecting an idea of him, the heir we'd molded since childhood. But watching you today, seeing how you stand your ground, how you fight for what you believe in... Eleanor reached across the table, squeezing Alexia's hand. You make him better. Not just happier, but better. As a leader, as a man, as the father he's about to become. Tears pricked at Alexia's eyes. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Eleanor said with a hint of mischief. Wait until I start insisting on planning the wedding. Later that evening, as Alexia recounted the conversation to Kaio, she found herself studying his face. He was lounging on their bed, his suit replaced by soft loungewear, reading glasses perched on his nose as he reviewed documents. Your mother called me her daughter-in-law, she said carefully. Kaio set down his papers, removing his glasses. Is that something you'd want? To be my wife? Are you asking? Not yet. He pulled her close, his hand finding its usual place on her bump. When I do, it won't be because of the baby, or my mother, or anything else. It will be because I want to spend my life loving you, challenging you, growing with you. He kissed her softly. But yes, Alexia Monroe, one day soon, I'm going to ask you to marry me, and I hope you'll say yes. She curled into him, feeling their baby move as if in response to their conversation. I will, she whispered. When you ask, I will. Outside their window, Atlanta glittered in the darkness, a constellation of lights matching the joy sparkling in their hearts. They had faced their first major challenges, family expectations, professional scrutiny, personal doubts, and emerged stronger. Together they were writing a new story, one where love and career, passion and professionalism could coexist and flourish. And somewhere in the city, Olivia was probably already planning what to wear to the wedding she knew would come, while Eleanor Wolfe sat in her hotel suite, smiling as she looked at nursery design magazines, both women already part of the unexpected but beautiful family Alexia and Kaio were building. One truth, one challenge, one love-filled day at a time. At 20 weeks pregnant, Alexia had grown accustomed to the changes in her body, the way her growing bump seemed to lead her into every room. What she wasn't prepared for was the wave of dizziness that hit her during a routine morning meeting. Alexia, her team leader's voice seemed to come from far away. Are you all right? She tried to stand to assure everyone she was fine, but the room tilted dangerously. The last thing she heard was someone calling her name before everything went black. She woke to bright hospital lights and the steady beep of monitors. Kaio sat beside her bed, his usually perfect hair disheveled, his tie loose around his neck. When he saw her eyes open, the relief on his face was palpable. Don't ever scare me like that again, he whispered, taking her hand. The baby. Her free hand flew to her stomach. Is fine, a new voice assured her. Dr. Miller stepped into view, chart in hand. But you, Ms. Monroe, are severely anemic. Your blood pressure is also concerning. We need to discuss reducing your workload. No, Alexia said immediately. I have the merger transition to oversee, the new market strategy implementation. Alexia. Kaio's voice was gentle but firm. Nothing is more important than your health and our babies. Your partner is right, Dr. Miller added. I'm recommending bed rest for at least 2 weeks, then we'll reassess. Your body is telling you to slow down. You need to listen. After the doctor left, Alexia turned to Kaio, tears threatening. I can't just stop working. The board finally started taking me seriously, and now they'll respect you for taking care of yourself and our child. He brushed a curl from her face. I've already spoken to HR. You can work remotely, delegate the in-person meetings. Madison will coordinate everything. You're handling this very calmly, she observed, studying his face. A muscle ticked in his jaw. Calm is not what I'm feeling. When they called me when I saw you unconscious, he closed his eyes briefly. I have never been more terrified in my life. The raw emotion in his voice made her heart ache. I'm sorry, she whispered. Don't apologize. He pressed his forehead to hers. Just let me take care of you, both of you. Later that evening, settled back in their penthouse, Alexia watched Kaio transform their living room into a comfortable workspace. He'd arranged for a reclining desk setup, positioned so she could see both her laptop and the Atlanta skyline. "Olivia's coming over tomorrow to help you organize your remote workflow," he said, adjusting a pillow behind her back. "And my mother, well, she's insisting on flying down again. She doesn't have to." "Try telling her that." He smiled slightly. "She's already ordered every pregnancy pillow on the market and hired a professional chef to prepare nutrient-rich meals. Your mother is becoming surprisingly maternal. I think she's making up for lost time." Kaio sat beside her, his hand finding its usual place on her bump. "With me, with us, with the baby." Speaking of which, he reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Alexia's heart stopped. "Kaio, this isn't because of today," he said quickly. "I've had this for weeks, waiting for the perfect moment. But today made me realize something. There is no perfect moment. There's just us loving each other, facing whatever comes our way together." He opened the box, revealing a stunning emerald-cut diamond ring with delicate sapphire accents. "I love you, Alexia Monroe. Your strength, your brilliance, your heart. Marry me." Through tears, she nodded. "Yes, of course, yes." The ring slid perfectly onto her finger, catching the evening light. As Kaio kissed her, their baby kicked, a strong movement they both felt. "Someone approves." Alexia laughed softly. The next few days settled into a new rhythm. Alexia worked from her comfortable setup, connected to the office through video calls and shared documents. Olivia became a constant presence, bringing work updates, gossip, and much-needed laughter. But on the fourth day, something changed. Alexia woke to sharp pains in her abdomen. Kaio was already at the office for an early meeting, and panic clawed at her throat as she reached for her phone. "Kaio!" she gasped when he answered. "Something's wrong." She had never heard him move so fast. Within 15 minutes, he was bursting through their door, already on the phone with Dr. Miller. Everything after that became a blur of ambulance lights and hospital corridors. "The baby is under stress," Dr. Miller explained after examining her. "Your blood pressure has spiked dangerously. We need to get it under control immediately." Hours passed in a haze of medications and monitoring. Kaio never left her side, his usual corporate control completely abandoned. As he held her hand, whispered prayers, made calls to postpone meetings without a second thought. Olivia arrived with an overnight bag and tears in her eyes. "I've got your comfortable clothes, your Kindle, everything you need. Just stay strong, okay?" Eleanor appeared next, her usual elegance softened by genuine concern. She took one look at her son's haunted face and took charge. "Kaio, go get some air," she commanded gently. "I'll sit with Alexia." Once they were alone, Eleanor took Alexia's hand. "You know, when I was pregnant with Kaio, I had similar complications." "You did?" "Mm-hmm. I was so focused on proving I could do everything. Be the perfect lawyer, the perfect wife, handle every case and client. My body finally rebelled." She squeezed Alexia's hand. "Want to know what I learned? Please. That sometimes the strongest thing we can do is let others be strong for us." Eleanor's eyes were soft. "My son loves you more than anything in this world. Let him take care of you. Let all of us help." When Kaio returned, some of the wild fear had left his eyes, replaced by determined focus. He sat beside Alexia's bed, pulling out his tablet. "I've restructured my entire schedule," he said. "Delegated most of my direct responsibilities to the senior team. For the next month, I'm working primarily from home." "Kaio, you can't." "Yes, I can." His voice was firm. "I built this company to run without me having to control every detail. It's time I proved that." He took her hand, touching her engagement ring. "You and our baby are my priority. Everything else can wait." Dr. Miller's evening update brought cautious good news. The medications were working, the baby's vitals improving. But she was clear. Alexia would need to remain in the hospital for at least a week, then face extended bed rest at home. That night, as monitors beeped softly and Atlanta's lights twinkled beyond the hospital windows, Alexia watched Kaio sleeping uncomfortably in the chair beside her bed. His hand hadn't left hers for hours, as if he could keep her safe through sheer force of will. She thought about Eleanor's words, about strength and surrender, about how love sometimes means letting go of control, letting others carry you when you can't walk alone. Their baby moved, gentler now, more settled. Alexia placed her free hand on her bump, sending silent promises. She would learn to rest, to accept help, to let love guide her instead of pride. Tomorrow she would start delegating more work. She would let Eleanor fuss over her, let Olivia distract her with magazines and gossip, let Kaio work from her hospital room despite her protests. Because that's what family does. The family they were building. unexpected and beautiful and stronger than any corporate empire. Outside, a gentle rain began to fall, washing away the day's fears, promising new beginnings. In the quiet hospital room, surrounded by machines and love, Alexia finally understood what real strength meant. Not standing alone, but standing together, holding on through every storm. At 28 weeks pregnant, Alexia sat in what had become her favorite spot in the penthouse, a custom-designed reading nook overlooking Atlanta, surrounded by cushions and flooded with natural light. The past 2 months had taught her the art of stillness, of accepting help, of finding peace in the quiet moments. Kayo had transformed their home office into a serene workspace where she could manage her reduced workload while maintaining the doctor-mandated rest. He'd kept his word about working primarily from home, running most meetings virtually, his protective instincts now balanced with understanding that she needed some independence. More tea? Eleanor's voice broke through her thoughts. Kayo's mother had practically moved into the guest suite, her corporate responsibilities in New York managed remotely, just like her son's. "Thank you," Alexia said, accepting the cup of pregnancy-safe herbal blend. "You don't have to keep taking care of me, you know." "Nonsense." Eleanor settled into the adjacent armchair, her own tea in hand. "Besides, I'm not just here for you. I'm here because my son finally learned to need someone, to love someone more than success. I'm not missing a moment of that miracle." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the subtle movements of Alexia's active baby boy. They'd learned the gender at last week's checkup, though they were keeping it private for now. The peace was interrupted by Kayo's raised voice from his study. Even through the closed door, his tension was evident. "Everything okay?" Alexia asked when he emerged, his silver eyes stormy. "My father's coming to Atlanta." Kayo ran a hand through his hair, his tell for genuine distress. "He's calling an emergency board meeting. Apparently my reduced schedule and delegation of responsibilities have made some members concerned about my commitment to the company." Eleanor set down her tea with a sharp click. "Richard wouldn't dare." "He would, Mother. You know he would." Kayo moved to Alexia's side, his hand automatically finding her bump. "He's never forgiven me for choosing my own path, for building the consulting division instead of joining the law firm. Now he's using my focus on family as proof that he was right." "When?" Alexia asked quietly. "Tomorrow morning." He knelt beside her chair, his eyes intense. "I don't want you anywhere near this. The stress is less dangerous than me sitting here wondering what's happening." She touched his face gently. "I'm stable now, Kayo. Dr. Miller said short trips are fine as long as I'm careful." "Alexia's right," Eleanor interjected. "In fact, her presence might be exactly what the board needs to see." "What do you mean?" "They're questioning your commitment. Show them what real commitment looks like, to your company and your family." Eleanor's eyes gleamed with strategy. "Let them see the man who can run an empire from home, because his priorities are finally in the right order." The next morning, Alexia entered the boardroom on Kayo's arm, her growing bump elegant in a dove-grey maternity dress. She felt the stares, heard the whispers, but kept her head high. Richard Wolfe stood at the head of the table, his silver hair and commanding presence leaving no doubt about his relation to Kayo. His eyes narrowed at their entrance. "This is a closed board meeting," he said coldly. "Family observers are not—" "Ms. Monroe is not an observer," Harrison interrupted, surprising everyone. "She's still head of market strategy, and her latest remote implementation plans have increased our millennial investment portfolio by 30%. She has every right to be here." Alexia squeezed Kayo's hand before taking her seat, Eleanor positioning herself protectively on her other side. "Now," Richard continued as if there had been no interruption, "we're here to discuss the concerning shift in leadership focus over the past 2 months. Client meetings delayed, responsibilities delegated, decisions deferred. Decisions executed precisely as they should be," Kayo cut in, his voice carrying that quiet authority Alexia loved. "Every change has been strategic, every delegation carefully planned. Would you like to see the numbers?" He pulled up a holographic display, filling the room with real-time data. "Our efficiency has increased 15% since implementing the new management structure. Employee satisfaction is up, client retention has strengthened, and our adaptive response time to market changes has improved dramatically." "Because you're not micromanaging every decision," Eleanor added. "You've built a strong team, son. Letting them lead isn't weakness. It's exactly what a true CEO should do." "And what happens when the baby comes?" Richard demanded. "When your attention is even more divided?" My attention isn't divided, Father. It's exactly where it needs to be. Kaio's voice softened as he looked at Alexia. Having a family hasn't made me weaker or less committed. It's made me stronger, more efficient, more human. Human doesn't build empires, Richard scoffed. No, Alexia spoke up, her voice clear and steady. But it keeps them from becoming hollow. She met her future father-in-law's gaze. Your son has built something extraordinary here, not just a successful company, but a legacy of balance, of proving that power and love can coexist. That's what will attract the next generation of talent and clients. That's what will make this company last. The room fell silent. Harrison nodded slowly, others following suit. Even Richard seemed temporarily at a loss for words. I move to maintain current operational structures, Harrison said formally. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. Even Richard's hand raised reluctantly after a sharp look from Eleanor. Later that evening, as they celebrated their victory with a quiet dinner at home, Alexia watched Kaio with their closest allies, Eleanor discussing nursery colors, Olivia showing off the tiny business suits she'd bought for the baby, never too early for proper boardroom attire, Madison coordinating their reduced schedule for the coming months. Penny, for your thoughts? Kaio asked softly, noticing her contemplation. I was just thinking about what your father said about empires. She smiled, taking his hand. He was right in a way. Human doesn't build empires, it builds something better, it builds families. Speaking of family, Eleanor interrupted, holding up her tablet. We need to discuss the wedding. I'm thinking a small ceremony before the baby comes. Intimate, elegant, just our closest circle. Mother, Kaio began. Actually, Alexia said slowly, I like that idea. She looked at Kaio. Not because we have to, but because I want to. I want our son to be born into a family that's official in every way, that shows him love comes in all forms, passionate like ours, fierce like Olivia's friendship, unexpected like your mother's acceptance. Kaio's kiss silenced her, earning cheers from their assembled family. When he pulled back, his silver eyes were bright with emotion. 2 weeks, he said. Give us that long to plan something perfect. One condition, Alexia added, looking at Eleanor. No huge society affair. Just us, just love. My dear, Eleanor smiled, taking her hand. That's all I want for you both now. The society pages had their scandal. Let them see your happily ever after, too. Outside, Atlanta's lights began to twinkle on, painting the sky in shades of hope. Alexia leaned into Kaio's embrace, feeling their son move as if dancing to the rhythm of their joy. They had faced every challenge: family disapproval, public scrutiny, health scares, corporate politics, and emerged stronger. Not because they were perfect, but because they were perfectly matched. Two souls who had found each other in the dark and decided to light up each other's worlds. In 2 weeks, they would make it official. But the truth was, they had been building their empire of love since that first night in a wrongly assigned hotel room, when two carefully constructed worlds collided and something extraordinary began. The evening sun painted the Atlanta Botanical Gardens in shades of gold as Alexia stood before a vintage mirror in the garden's historic greenhouse. At 30 weeks pregnant, she wore a custom-designed ivory gown that flowed elegantly over her bump, her dark curls adorned with tiny white flowers. You look absolutely perfect, Olivia declared, adjusting the simple veil. Like some kind of pregnancy goddess. Indeed you do, Eleanor added, her own eyes suspiciously bright. Though we should get you seated soon. No overexerting yourself, even today. The past 2 weeks had been a whirlwind of intimate preparations. True to their wishes, the guest list was small, just their closest family and friends, the people who had supported their unconventional love story from the beginning. 5 minutes, Madison called through the door, ever the efficient coordinator, even on her boss's wedding day. Alexia took a deep breath, one hand resting on her bump where her son was particularly active. He knows something special is happening, she smiled. Of course he does, Olivia grinned. He's got his daddy's perfect timing. A knock at the door revealed a surprise visitor, Richard Wolfe, looking somewhat uncomfortable in his formal attire. May I have a moment with my future daughter-in-law? He asked, uncharacteristically hesitant. Eleanor and Olivia exchanged looks before quietly excusing themselves. Richard stepped into the room, studying Alexia with those familiar silver eyes so like his son's. I owe you an apology, he said finally. Several, actually. Mr. Wolfe, Richard, please. He moved closer, his corporate mask slipping to reveal something more vulnerable. I spent decades building an empire, convinced that power and success were the only legacy worth leaving. Then you walked into my son's life and showed all of us, what real legacy looks like. Tears threatened to ruin Alexia's careful makeup. I just loved him, she said simply. The real him, not the empire. I know. That's what I never understood before. Richard reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box. This belonged to my mother. She was different from what I became. Softer, wiser. She would have loved you. Inside the box was a delicate sapphire bracelet, its vintage setting catching the evening light. Something blue, Richard said gruffly, and something that welcomes you officially to the Wolf family, though you've already taught us more about being a family than I managed in 30 years. As he fastened the bracelet around her wrist, Alexia impulsively hugged him. After a startled moment, Richard hugged her back. Take care of him, he whispered. Take care of them both. I will. The garden ceremony was everything they'd wanted. Intimate, elegant, and filled with love. Kaio waited beneath an arch of white flowers, his silver eyes lighting up when he saw her. Despite Eleanor's protests, Alexia had insisted on walking the short aisle herself. I choose him, she'd said. I want every step to be my choice. Their vows were simple, but profound. Kaio spoke of fate and wrong hotel rooms, of learning to love beyond ambition. Alexia spoke of walls coming down and strength found in surrender. You saw me, she said softly, when I was trying so hard to be invisible. You loved me, not for what I could be, but for who I already was. You changed everything, he responded, his voice rough with emotion. Every priority, every goal, every dream. You showed me that real power isn't in controlling life, but in embracing it, mess and miracle alike. As they exchanged rings, their baby kicked strongly enough for both to feel. Laughter rippled through the small gathering. Even Richard smiled. The reception was held in the garden's intimate restaurant, transformed into a magical space with twinkling lights and soft music. Olivia's toast had everyone both laughing and crying, while Eleanor spoke of second chances and learning to see love through new eyes. But it was Harrison's unexpected speech that touched them deeply. I've been in business longer than most of you have been alive, the senior board member said. I've seen empires rise and fall, but what these two have built, both in our company and in their hearts, that's the kind of success they don't teach in business school. That's real legacy. As the evening wound down, Kaio led Alexia to a quiet corner of the garden. The Atlanta skyline glittered beyond the trees, a fitting backdrop to their moment of peace. How are you feeling? He asked, his hand finding its usual place on her bump. Perfect, she smiled. Tired, but perfect. No regrets? About the small ceremony, about any of it? Only that we waited this long. She leaned into him. Although your timing has always been impeccable, Mr. Wolf. Has it, Mrs. Wolf? The new name sent a shiver of joy through her. Before she could respond, however, she felt a different kind of sensation. A sharp, distinctive pain. Alexia, Kaio's voice sharpened with concern. I think, she said slowly, your son has inherited your sense of timing. The next few hours passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Their wedding guests transformed into a support team, Olivia grabbing the pre-packed hospital bag from the car, Eleanor coordinating with Dr. Miller, Madison handling the logistics of turning their intimate wedding into an unexpectedly early baby shower. In the delivery room, Kaio never left Alexia's side. Gone was the corporate titan, the controlled CEO. In his place was simply a man in love, supporting his wife through each contraction, whispering words of encouragement and love. You're the strongest person I know, he murmured as she gripped his hand. You've got this, my love. Hours later, as the first light of dawn painted the hospital room in soft colors, their son made his entrance into the world, a perfect blend of them both, with Kaio's silver eyes and Alexia's darker skin tone, tiny fingers gripping his father's hand with surprising strength. Lucas, Alexia whispered their chosen name. Lucas Richard Wolf. Kaio's eyes widened at the middle name. They hadn't discussed it. But when his father was allowed in briefly and heard the name, the last walls between generations crumbled, as Richard Wolf, titan of industry, cried openly while holding his grandson. Later, when their family had gone and the three of them were alone, Kaio sat on the edge of Alexia's bed, holding them both. Thank you, he said softly. For what? For walking into the wrong hotel room, for seeing past my walls, for giving me everything I never knew I needed. Alexia looked down at their sleeping son, then up at her husband. Thank you for letting me in, for growing with me, for building something more precious than any empire. Outside the window, Atlanta was waking up to a new day. But in that quiet room, time seemed to stand still as two people who had once hidden behind careful masks held their miracle and marveled at love's perfect timing. Their story hadn't followed any conventional path. It had begun with a mistake, grown through challenges and blossomed despite every obstacle. But perhaps that was what made it perfect. Not its flawlessness, but its truth, its reality, its undeniable proof that sometimes the wrong room leads to exactly the right life. As Lucas sighed in his sleep, Caio leaned down to kiss his wife. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "Both of you. Always." "Always," Alexia echoed, her heart full of a joy she once thought impossible. They had built their own empire, after all, not of corporate power or social status, but of love in all its forms. And as the morning sun rose over Atlanta, painting their new family in shades of gold, they knew that this was just the beginning of their greatest adventure yet. 5 years later, the autumn sun streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Wolf penthouse, now transformed by 5 years of family life. Designer furniture shared space with children's toys, corporate reports mingled with finger paintings, and the once pristine kitchen bore the happy marks of family cooking adventures. Alexia sat in her old favorite reading nook, now expanded into a cozy family corner, watching her husband chase their giggling children. 5-year-old Lucas, a perfect blend of both parents with his father's silver eyes and his mother's curls, led the charge, while his 2-year-old sister, Sophia, all brown eyes and mischievous smiles, toddled after them on sturdy legs. "Got you!" Caio scooped up Sophia, his corporate persona completely forgotten as he blew raspberries on her stomach. His hair had a touch of silver at the temples now, adding distinguished charm to his still handsome face. The sound of their daughter's laughter filled the penthouse, a sound that never failed to make him smile. "Daddy, my turn," Lucas demanded, climbing onto his father's back. Caio obliged, somehow managing to juggle both children while maintaining his balance. Alexia touched her slightly rounded belly, where their third miracle was just beginning to show. This pregnancy, planned and peaceful, was proving much easier than her first 2 adventures. The company had evolved with their family. Caio had permanently restructured the leadership, creating a more balanced approach that allowed both him and Alexia to prioritize family while maintaining their professional success. She now headed the entire strategy division, her innovative approaches having revolutionized how the firm handled modern markets. "Aunt Olivia," Lucas suddenly shouted as the elevator doors opened. Olivia, now a marketing executive and recently engaged herself, entered with her usual flair, designer bags filled with gifts dangling from her arms. "Where are my favorite munchkins?" Behind her came Eleanor and Richard, their weekly family dinner being a tradition that had grown more precious with time. Eleanor immediately moved to help Sophia with her wobbly walking, while Richard, now a doting grandfather who read bedtime stories with different voices for each character, scooped up Lucas for their secret handshake. "How are you feeling?" Olivia asked, settling beside Alexia while the others chatted. "Better than the first 2 times," Alexia smiled, watching her family, "though your godson is convinced it's another sister." "Lucas takes his big brother duties very seriously," Olivia laughed. Speaking of which, she pulled out a small gift bag. A little something for the new addition. Inside was a tiny business suit, matching the one she'd given Lucas 5 years ago. Some traditions were worth keeping. The evening unfolded with comfortable familiarity, dinner filled with laughter and stories. The children showing off their latest achievements, plans being made for holidays and futures. Madison, who still ran their professional lives with incredible efficiency, called briefly to confirm their reduced schedule for Alexia's upcoming maternity leave. Later, after the children were asleep and their extended family had gone home, Caio and Alexia stood in their favorite spot by the windows, looking out at the Atlanta skyline. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked softly. "The complete control, the total focus on empire building?" "Never," he said without hesitation, his hand finding its way to her bump. Some habits never changed. "This is the greatest empire I could have built. Every laugh, every moment, every tiny victory with them. It's worth more than any corporate achievement. Even when Lucas reprogrammed your presentation to show his dinosaur drawings." "Especially then," Caio chuckled. "He's got his mother's talent for disrupting my perfectly planned systems." Alexia turned in his arms, studying the face she'd loved through so many changes. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For letting that wrong hotel room become the right beginning. For growing with me. for building this beautiful chaos instead of perfect order. He kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. Thank you for teaching me that the best kind of power isn't control, it's love. From down the hall came a small voice. Daddy, one more story. They shared a knowing smile. Lucas had inherited his mother's tendency to stay up reading, always hungry for one more tale. Go, Alexia laughed. Your son awaits. Our son, Caio corrected, stealing another kiss before heading to the nursery. Alexia lingered by the window, one hand on her bump, the other holding the sapphire bracelet Richard had given her on her wedding day. The jewelry had become her good luck charm, a reminder of how love could transform even the most rigid hearts. 5 years ago, she'd been hiding behind corporate walls, afraid to be seen. Now she stood in the heart of a family that had redefined success, that had proven love was the greatest business strategy of all. Outside, Atlanta glittered with possibility, just as it had that fateful night when a room key malfunction changed everything. But the real magic wasn't in the city lights or corporate heights. It was in a little boy's laughter, a toddler's wobbly steps, a family's weekly dinners, and the endless love that made it all possible. They had written their own fairy tale, one board meeting and bedtime story at a time. And as Alexia listened to her husband's voice floating down the hall, weaving dragons and dreams for their son, she smiled at the perfect imperfection of it all. Sometimes the wrong turn leads to the right destination. Sometimes the biggest dreams come in the smallest moments. And sometimes, just sometimes, love's perfect timing turns a simple mistake into a lifetime of magic. The end. Based on this deeply emotional story of Alexia and Caio, I've created an engaging question for you. If you were in Alexia's shoes, would you have the courage to defy all social and business expectations for love? Imagine yourself having to choose between maintaining a carefully constructed professional reputation or following your heart, knowing that it could completely change your life. How would you cope with the pressure from Caio's traditional family, the comments at work and all the changes that unexpected love brings? That moment in the hotel when she could have simply left the room and avoided this whole transformation in her life, would you have stayed or gone? Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time. Black woman helps rich man in wheelchair at airport, and his proposal surprises everyone. Before we explore all the details of this incredible story, tell us where you're following us from and the time. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a thing, and let's embark on this journey together. The morning Avery Michelle Brooks decided to break her own rules began like any other, with the soft click of her apartment door closing at exactly 5:45 a.m. She always arrived early for her shift at Terminal B of Seattle-Tacoma International Airport, not because her supervisor demanded it, but because those quiet moments before dawn belonged to her alone. Her small apartment complex stood silent in the pre-dawn darkness, its weathered brick facade holding secrets of 100 lives within. As she walked to the bus stop, her squeaky clean white sneakers cutting through puddles left by last night's rain, she pulled her phone from her jacket pocket and played her morning ritual, Lauryn Hill's voice filling her ears with strength for the day ahead. The number 574 bus arrived right on schedule, its headlights cutting through the morning fog. Avery claimed her usual spot by the window, pulled out one of her colorful notebooks, today's was sunshine yellow, and began her morning routine. Under the dim bus lights, she wrote in her neat, precise handwriting, October 15th, goals. Finish Chapter 7, accounting homework. Call Mom, it's been 3 days. Check on scholarship deadline. Buy more chamomile tea. Remember who you are. That last one was new. She'd started adding it recently, though she wasn't quite sure why. Maybe it was the way life had begun to feel like a carefully scheduled series of moments, each one planned and predictable, safe, controlled, just the way she liked it, or used to like it. The airport was already stirring when she arrived, its massive corridors humming with early morning flights and bleary-eyed travelers. Avery made her way to Fresh Press, the juice stand tucked between gates B3 and B4, her small domain of stainless steel and fresh produce. She tied her dark hair back in its usual elegant ponytail, secured her name tag, and began the morning prep. There was something meditative about arranging the fruits just so, organic apples stacked in perfect pyramids, oranges lined up like solar systems, kale bundles standing at attention. Each squeeze of juice she made was a small act of care, even if most customers barely looked up from their phones to notice. The morning rush came and went, businessmen ordering wheatgrass shots with grimaces, young mothers asking for extra straws, pilots grabbing their usual green smoothies. Avery moved through it all with quiet grace, her dark eyes taking in more than she let on. That's why she noticed him. He sat in a sleek black wheelchair near the window, struggling with an oversized leather suitcase, a silver laptop bag, and what looked like an expensive wooden cane. His business casual attire, crisp blue button-down, charcoal slacks, Italian leather shoes, screamed corporate success. But there was something else, something in the way his jaw clenched, in how his fingers gripped the wheelchair's arms a little too tightly, pride wrestling with pain. Avery recognized that look. She'd seen it in her grandmother's eyes during those final months, when accepting help felt like surrendering. Before she could second-guess herself, she was already moving from behind the counter, her sensible shoes quiet against the terminal's polished floor. He looked up as she approached, and she caught the flash of guarded vulnerability in his blue-gray eyes before it disappeared behind a wall of practiced professionalism. Salt and pepper temples framed a face that was handsome in a way that suggested years of boardroom confidence, now slightly undone by whatever circumstance had placed him in that chair. "You gonna declare war on that suitcase? Or accept some diplomatic intervention?" The words came out before she could stop them, playful but direct, her grandmother's influence showing through. He blinked, clearly caught off guard by her approach. For a moment, Avery thought she'd made a terrible mistake. But then something shifted in his expression, the smallest crack in that corporate veneer, and one corner of his mouth twitched upward. "Depends on the terms of surrender," he replied, his voice carrying a hint of dry humor beneath its polished surface. "Full immunity, no conditions," Avery said, already reaching for the suitcase handle, "though I might throw in a free juice as a peace offering. That's a dangerous precedent to set, rewarding incompetence with beverages." He released his grip on the luggage, watching as she efficiently maneuvered it into a more manageable position. "I prefer to think of it as investing in potential." Avery surprised herself with the easy banter. This wasn't like her. She kept to herself, did her job, stayed focused on her goals. But something about his masked vulnerability called to the part of her that remembered what it was like to need help, but not know how to ask for it. "Jason Monroe," he offered, extending his hand. His grip was firm but not overwhelming, professional yet somehow personal. "Avery Brooks," she replied, noting how his eyes held hers steadily, neither avoiding her gaze nor trying to dominate it. "Now, about that juice, what's your poison?" "Surprise me," he said after a moment's consideration. "Just nothing that looks like lawn clippings or promises to cleanse my soul." Avery felt a genuine smile tugging at her lips, one soulfully uncleansed, lawn-free surprise coming up. She walked back to her stand, aware of his eyes following her movement, not with the entitled scrutiny she sometimes encountered, but with something that felt more like curiosity. As she worked, combining fresh orange juice with a hint of ginger and a touch of mint, refreshing without being preachy, she found herself wondering about his story. The wheelchair was clearly recent. She could tell by how he wasn't quite comfortable with it yet. The cane suggested he was in transition, recovering. But from what? When she returned with his drink, he took a sip and raised his eyebrows appreciatively. "Not bad, Miss Brooks. You've managed to make healthy actually taste good. That's practically a superpower." "Well, Mr. Monroe, sometimes the best things happen when we let go of our usual defenses." She said it lightly, but something flickered in his eyes that told her the words had landed somewhere deeper than intended. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, holding it out to her with a slight hesitation she might have missed if she hadn't been paying attention. "If you're ever interested in continuing this conversation, give me a call, no pressure." The card was heavy, expensive stock, embossed with his name and title, Jason T. Monroe, Chief Executive Officer, though the company name had been neatly crossed out with a single pen stroke. "No pressure," she echoed, tucking the card into her apron pocket, "though I should warn you, I'm not easily impressed by titles." "Good," he said softly, and this time his smile reached his eyes, "because I'm not much for titles these days anyway." As she watched him navigate his wheelchair toward the gates, his movements more graceful than before, Avery felt something shift in the carefully ordered structure of her world. She pulled out her sunshine yellow notebook and added one more line to her daily goals. "Remember who you are becoming." The business card seemed to burn in her pocket, a small rectangle of possibility she wasn't sure she was ready for. But then again, she thought, watching him disappear into the morning crowd, maybe being ready wasn't the point. Sometimes the best things in life arrived precisely when you weren't looking for them. She just hoped she'd have the courage to find out if this was one of them. 3 days, 14 hours, and 26 minutes. That's how long Avery stared at Jason Monroe's business card before finally picking up her phone. She'd taken to carrying the card in her sunshine yellow notebook, its presence a constant reminder of a choice unmade. The evening she finally called, she was curled up in her favorite spot, a worn armchair by her apartment's only window, watching Seattle's endless rain paint patterns on the glass. Her tiny studio apartment was a testament to careful budgeting and intentional living. Neat stacks of accounting textbooks on a second-hand desk, a small but immaculate kitchen area, and walls decorated with nothing but a single framed photo of her grandmother, smiling wide and fierce at the camera. Avery's fingers hovered over her phone's keypad, her reflection in the rain-streaked window looking back at her with quiet judgment. What was she doing? She had a plan. Finish her accounting degree, save enough for her own office, build something solid. Nowhere in that carefully constructed future was there room for whatever this might be. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her memory. "Baby girl, sometimes the best plans are the ones life makes for you." Before she could talk herself out of it, she dialed the number. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3. Monroe speaking. His voice was different over the phone, deeper, more guarded. Avery took a breath. "Hi, this is Avery. From the airport? The Juice diplomatic intervention?" A pause, then a soft chuckle that seemed to warm the line. "The one who's not easily impressed by titles. I was beginning to think you'd filed my card under strange men with luggage problems. Actually, I filed it under surprisingly decent human beings who need better suitcase management skills." The words came easily, surprising her. "Touché." Another pause, but comfortable this time. "So, Avery from the airport, would you be interested in continuing our diplomatic relations over coffee? I know a place that makes a decent attempt at peace negotiations." She found herself smiling despite her nerves. "As long as it's not in an airport. Deal. Though I should warn you, I come with wheels these days." "Good thing I come with patience," she replied, thinking of her grandmother's final months, and a fondness for taking things slow. They agreed to meet that Sunday at a small coffee shop in Capitol Hill, neutral territory as Jason called it. Avery spent the next 3 days telling herself it wasn't really a date, just coffee, just conversation, just... Sunday arrived with unexpected sunshine, as if Seattle itself was curious about what might unfold. Avery chose her outfit with careful consideration. High-waisted jeans, a soft cream sweater, and her signature gold hoops. Professional but approachable, like this wasn't something she'd thought about for days. The coffee shop, Moonlight Grounds, was tucked between a bookstore and a vintage record shop. Its large windows let in streams of morning light, and the smell of freshly ground coffee beans wrapped around her like a welcome. She arrived 15 minutes early, another habit from her grandmother. Early is on time is late. Jason was already there. He sat at a corner table, his wheelchair positioned at an angle that suggested both comfort and strategic awareness of his surroundings. He wore a charcoal grey sweater that looked soft enough to sink into, and those silver threads at his temples caught the sunlight in a way that made Avery's heart do something unexpected. Their eyes met across the room, and for a moment, neither moved. Then he smiled. Not his polished corporate smile, but something more tentative, more real. "You're early," they said simultaneously, and just like that, the tension broke. Avery made her way to the table, noting how he'd already ordered 2 cups. "Let me guess," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "You had your assistant run a full background check and discovered my pathological need for chamomile tea." "Close," he replied, sliding 1 cup toward her. "I had the barista run a full personality analysis based on your juice-making philosophy. Apparently, people who skip the wheatgrass and go straight for citrus tend to appreciate a good Earl Grey." She wrapped her hands around the warm cup, inhaling the familiar bergamot scent. "Impressive detective work, Mr. Monroe." "Please," he said softly, "call me Jason. I'm trying to leave the Mr. Monroe behind with the corner office." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. There it was again. That flash of vulnerability she'd caught at the airport, like a crack in expensive marble. "Want to talk about it?" she offered, not pushing, just opening the door. He stared into his coffee for a long moment. 6 months ago, I was CEO of Cascade Ridge Hotels. Corner office, executive bathroom, the whole cliché. Then one morning, I woke up and couldn't feel my legs. Avery stayed silent, letting him find his words. Spinal cord inflammation. The doctors aren't sure what triggered it. Surgery helped, but recovery. He gestured at his wheelchair, with a hint of his earlier sarcasm. Let's just say it's been an exercise in patience I wasn't prepared for. And humility? Avery suggested gently. That too. He met her eyes. Though I'm still working on that part. Aren't we all? She took a sip of her tea, thinking of her own struggles with asking for help. My grandmother used to say that pride is just fear wearing a fancy suit. Jason laughed. A real laugh this time, unexpected and warm. Your grandmother sounds wise. She was. Avery touched the small locket at her neck, a habit she didn't realize she had until she caught Jason watching the gesture. She raised me, mostly, taught me everything important, how to make perfect cornbread, how to stand up straight when life tries to bend you, how to love without losing yourself. Sounds like she did a good job, Jason said quietly. Their conversation flowed easier after that, moving from family to favorite books, from career dreams to childhood memories. Avery found herself telling him about her accounting classes, about her dream of helping other women find financial independence. Jason shared stories about his own journey from hotel bellhop to CEO, though he spoke about his success with a new kind of distance, as if describing someone else's life. 2 hours passed like minutes. When Avery finally glanced at her watch, she was startled to see how much time had slipped away. I should go, she said reluctantly. I have a study group at 2. Jason nodded but made no move to leave. Thank you, he said suddenly, for calling. Thank you for answering. She stood, gathering her bag. And Jason, your suit looks a little less fancy today. He tilted his head, questioning. The pride, she clarified. It suits you better when it's not trying so hard. As she walked toward the door, she heard him call out, Same time next week? Avery turned, a smile playing at her lips. Depends. Will you be doing more detective work on my beverage preferences? I never reveal my sources, Miss Brooks. Good thing I like a little mystery, then. Outside, the Seattle sunshine had given way to its usual gentle rain. Avery didn't mind. She walked to the bus stop with unhurried steps, letting the cool drops fall on her face. Her grandmother's photo seemed to watch her from its place on her wall at home, and she could almost hear her voice. See, baby, sometimes the best plans are the ones we don't make. In her bag, her sunshine yellow notebook waited for new entries, but for once Avery didn't feel the need to write anything down. Some moments, she was learning, were better left unplanned, unscheduled, and perfectly wonderfully uncertain. She just hoped her heart knew what it was doing. The Seattle autumn had painted the city in shades of amber and gold when Avery's carefully structured world began to shift. 3 Sunday coffee meetings had turned into midweek text messages, which had evolved into long phone calls that stretched past midnight. Now, standing at her juice stand on a quiet Tuesday morning, she found herself smiling at a message on her phone, trying physical therapy without the wheelchair today. Either I'm brave or stupid, possibly both. She typed back, bravery usually looks like stupidity until it works. His response came quickly. Speaking of brave acts of stupidity, dinner tonight? I know a place. Avery's heart did that strange flutter thing it had started doing lately. Their coffee meetings had felt safe, public, time-limited, casual. Dinner felt different. Dinner felt like crossing a line she wasn't sure she was ready to cross. Her fingers hovered over the phone. Before she could reply, a customer approached and she slipped the device into her apron pocket. As she prepared a complicated order of green smoothies for a group of flight attendants, her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind. Fear and opportunity often wear the same dress, baby girl. The trick is knowing which one you're dancing with. During her break, she pulled out her latest notebook, deep purple this time, and made 2 columns. Reasons to say no. Behind on accounting homework. Early shift tomorrow. What if he expects... She stopped writing, the last point unfinished. Reasons to say yes. Life isn't just about homework. He makes me laugh. I want to. The last point surprised her with its simplicity. When was the last time she'd done something simply because she wanted to? She picked up her phone. Brave it is. Tell me when and where. The restaurant was called Harbor Light, a small place overlooking Puget Sound. Jason had texted that he'd made reservations for 7 as adding, Don't worry, it's accessible. I checked. Twice. Avery arrived to find him already waiting outside, leaning on his cane. The wheelchair was nowhere in sight. He wore a navy blazer over a light blue shirt, and something about seeing him standing, even with support, made her breath catch. You did it, she said, approaching him. Don't celebrate yet, he replied with a slight grimace. The day is young, and my pride has a habit of writing checks my body can't cash. She noticed the strain around his eyes, the way his knuckles whitened on the cane's handle. We could do this another night, she offered. No, he said firmly, then softened his tone. No, I want to be here, with you, standing. The hostess led them to a corner table with a view of the water. Jason's movements were careful, deliberate, and Avery found herself fighting the urge to help. She'd learned from her grandmother that sometimes support meant stepping back, letting people find their own way. Once seated, some of the tension left his shoulders. I should explain, he said, gesturing to his cane. My therapist suggested I try short outings without the chair, building strength or something equally optimistic. And you chose tonight? His eyes met hers across the table. I wanted you to see me like this at least once before what? Before you decide this is too complicated. The words came out quick, almost defensive. Avery took a slow sip of her water, choosing her words carefully. Jason, I spent 2 years watching my grandmother fight cancer. I know complicated. What I don't know is why you think I'm looking for simple. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. Before he could respond, their server arrived with menus and a well-practiced smile. As they ordered, Avery noticed how Jason's corporate mask slipped back into place when speaking to the server. Polite, charming, but distant. It was only when they were alone again that the real Jason emerged, the one who made dry jokes about menu descriptions and admitted to watching cooking shows at 3 a.m. when the pain kept him awake. So, she said after their appetizers arrived, tell me something you haven't told anyone else. He raised an eyebrow. That's a dangerous request, Miss Brooks. I'll make you a deal. Truth for truth. Jason considered this, absently running a finger along the stem of his water glass. Okay, sometimes I miss who I was before. Not the job or the status, but the certainty. I used to know exactly who I was, what I wanted. Now, he shrugged, a gesture that tried too hard to be casual. Avery nodded, understanding more than she could say. Your turn to ask. What scares you most about this? He gestured between them. That's not fair. You didn't tell me what scares you. Everything, he said simply. Everything about this terrifies me. Your turn. Avery looked out at the darkening water, gathering her courage. I'm scared that I'm starting to need this. Need you. I don't do need. Need is messy and complicated and real, he finished softly. Yeah, she turned back to him. Real is scary. Tell me about it. His attempt at lightness fell flat. I can't even guarantee I'll be able to walk properly again. What kind of future is that to offer someone? Maybe the kind where we figure it out together. The words surprised them both. Their entrees arrived, creating a natural pause in the conversation. They ate in comfortable silence for a while, letting the weight of honesty settle around them. Outside, fairy lights blinked across the dark water like Morse code messages neither of them could decode. My grandmother, Avery said suddenly. She told me something once near the end. She said love isn't about being ready, it's about being willing. I didn't understand what she meant until she stopped, realizing what she'd almost said, what she'd almost admitted to herself. Jason reached across the table, his hand finding hers. His palm was warm, slightly calloused, real in a way that made her heart race. Until, before she could answer, a sharp spasm of pain crossed his face. He pulled his hand back, gripping the edge of the table. Jason? I'm fine, he said through clenched teeth. Just need a minute. But Avery could see the cost of his pride, the toll of trying to be who he used to be. Without a word, she signaled their server and asked for the check. You don't have to, he started. No, I don't. But I'm going to. Because sometimes being willing means knowing when to step back, and sometimes being brave means letting someone else be strong for you. In the taxi home, Jason was quiet, his cane resting against his leg. The pain medication he'd finally taken was starting to work, making his edges softer. I'm sorry, he said as they pulled up to his house, a modern structure overlooking the water. This wasn't how I wanted tonight to go. Avery touched his arm gently. Hey, real, remember? This is real. He turned to look at her, and in the dim light of the taxi she saw everything he couldn't say, the fear, the hope, the need that mirrored her own. Stay? He asked softly. Just stay and talk for a while. Avery thought of her early shift tomorrow, of her accounting homework waiting on her desk, of all the reasons she should say no. Instead, she paid the taxi driver and said, yes, because sometimes the bravest thing we can do is simply stay when everything in us wants to run. And sometimes love begins in the spaces between words, in the moments when we choose to be willing instead of ready. Jason's house was exactly what Avery had expected, and nothing like it at all. The architecture was sleek and modern, all clean lines and massive windows, every inch the successful CEO's waterfront retreat. But in the soft darkness of late evening, she could see the signs of a life in transition. A wheelchair folded in the corner, medical supplies discreetly tucked behind designer furniture, a collection of throw pillows that looked suspiciously therapeutic rather than decorative. "Sorry about the mess," Jason said as he carefully maneuvered through the door, still relying heavily on his cane. Despite the pain medication, each step was measured, intentional. Avery glanced around the immaculate space and smiled. "If this is your definition of mess, we need to have a serious conversation about standards." He laughed softly, but she caught the slight tremor in his hands as he lowered himself onto the oversized leather couch. Without asking, she grabbed one of the therapeutic pillows and placed it behind his lower back. His surprise at her intuitive understanding flickered across his face before settling into gratitude. "You're good at that," he said quietly. "At what?" "Helping without making it feel like help." Avery settled into an adjacent armchair, tucking her legs beneath her. "Years of practice. My grandmother was the proudest woman I knew. Had to get creative about caring for her." The house creaked gently in the evening wind, waves from the sound providing a distant rhythm to their conversation. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle's lights sparkled like earthbound stars. "Tell me about her," Jason said, his voice soft with genuine interest. "Your grandmother. You mention her often, but always in pieces." Avery touched her locket, her grandmother's last gift, and considered where to begin. Her name was Dorothy, but everyone called her Dot. She could make a feast from an empty kitchen, quote Maya Angelou from memory, and had absolutely no patience for self-pity. A smile tugged at her lips. "She would have liked you." Yeah. She appreciated people who fought their battles with grace." Jason's hand tightened on his cane, not feeling very graceful these days. "Grace isn't about perfection," Avery said, remembering her grandmother's words. "It's about getting back up when life knocks you down, even if getting up means using a cane." Silence settled between them, comfortable and warm. Jason shifted on the couch, wincing slightly, and Avery noticed the time, nearly midnight. "I should go," she said, but made no move to leave. "Stay," he said again, then quickly added, "just to talk. I sleep better when I'm not alone with my thoughts." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep in Avery's chest. She recognized the cost of such honesty from a man who'd built his life on appearing invulnerable. "Okay," she said simply, "but I need tea. Kitchen's through there. Chamomile's in the cabinet above the sink. I may have stocked up recently." Avery's heart did that flutter thing again. He'd remembered. Such a small detail, but it spoke volumes. In his kitchen, all stainless steel and marble countertops, she found not just chamomile tea, but her specific brand. As she waited for the water to boil, she studied the space. Protein shake bottles, prescription medications carefully arranged, a wall calendar marked with physical therapy appointments, evidence of a man rebuilding himself from the ground up. When she returned with 2 steaming mugs, Jason had managed to stretch out on the couch, his bad leg elevated on a cushion. She handed him a mug and settled back into her chair. "Truth for truth," she offered, echoing their dinner conversation. He nodded, cradling the warm mug. "Ladies first." Avery took a deep breath. "I'm behind on my accounting homework because I spend too much time thinking about you." His eyes widened slightly, but he recovered with a small smile. "That's quite a truth, Miss Brooks. Your turn." Jason stared into his tea for a long moment. "I fired my home health aide last week. She was perfectly competent, but I couldn't stand the way she looked at me, like I was a project to be managed rather than a person to be understood." "Is that why you tried going without the wheelchair tonight?" "Partly." He met her eyes. "Mostly, I wanted to feel normal, to pretend just for one evening that I could offer you a regular date with a regular guy." "Jason," Avery set her mug down and moved to perch on the edge of the couch near his feet. "I don't want regular. I want real. Real is messy," he reminded her, echoing her words from dinner. "Good thing I'm not afraid of mess." She smiled. "Well, emotional mess. My apartment is actually very tidy." That earned her a genuine laugh. "I never would have guessed Miss Color-Coded Notebooks." "Hey, organization is a love language. Is that what this is?" he asked softly. "Love?" The question hung in the air between them, delicate as spun glass. Avery felt her heart racing, but before she could respond, A spasm seized Jason's leg. He grimaced, trying to sit up. "Here," she said, moving to help him adjust. Her hands were steady as she repositioned the pillow under his leg, professional and practiced, from her years of caring for her grandmother. But when she looked up, their faces were inches apart. Time seemed to suspend itself. She could see the flecks of grey in his blue eyes, the slight stubble on his jaw, the way his breath caught when she didn't pull away. "Avery," he whispered, her name a question and an answer all at once. She closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his with gentle certainty. The kiss was soft, careful, full of everything they hadn't said yet. His hand came up to cup her cheek, and she felt the slight tremor in his fingers, but it only made the moment more real. When they finally parted, Jason rested his forehead against hers. "I'm terrified," he admitted. "Of what? Of not being enough, of being too much, of needing you more than I should." Avery pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. "My grandmother used to say that the best things in life should terrify us a little. Means we're growing." He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Your grandmother was a wise woman." "She was." Avery settled beside him on the couch, careful of his leg. "She also said that sometimes love looks like staying up too late drinking tea with someone who makes your heart race." "Is that what this is?" he asked again, but this time the question held no fear. Avery laced her fingers through his. "Maybe. Or maybe it's just the beginning of finding out." Outside, the sound continued its eternal conversation with the shore. Inside, two people who had stopped believing in simple answers found comfort in complicated truths. And somewhere, Avery thought, her grandmother was smiling. Because sometimes love doesn't announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it comes quietly, in shared mugs of chamomile tea and gentle kisses that taste like possibility. Sometimes it's found in the hours we borrow from tomorrow, staying up too late, talking too much, feeling too deeply. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly enough. Avery woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the gentle sound of waves. For a moment she was disoriented. This wasn't her small apartment with its worn armchair and carefully organized desk. Then memory flooded back. Chamomile tea, honest conversations, that kiss. She had fallen asleep on Jason's couch, her head resting on his shoulder, their fingers intertwined. Now a soft blanket was draped over her, but Jason was gone. The sound of movement from the kitchen drew her attention. "Please tell me you're not trying to cook," she called out, her voice still rough with sleep. "I'm a CEO, not completely helpless," came his reply, followed by what sounded suspiciously like a pot clattering to the floor. "Though I may have overestimated my ability to manage crutches and coffee simultaneously." Avery was on her feet instantly, smoothing her wrinkled clothes and running a hand through her hair. In the kitchen, she found Jason balancing precariously on crutches. No cane this morning, attempting to manage a French press with one hand. "The wheelchair would make this easier," she observed carefully. "Probably." His jaw tightened. "But I need to learn to do things without it." "Need to or want to?" He met her eyes then, and she saw the struggle there, pride wrestling with practicality, desire for independence battling against physical reality. Both. Neither. "I don't know anymore." Avery moved to the coffee maker, gently taking over. "Let me help with breakfast. Then we can talk about the difference between pushing limits and pushing luck. Is this where you tell me I'm being stubborn?" "No," she said, measuring coffee grounds with practiced precision. "This is where I tell you I have exactly 47 minutes before I need to leave for work, and I'd rather spend them doing something other than watching you fight with kitchen appliances." That earned her a reluctant smile. "Has anyone ever told you you're annoyingly practical?" says the man trying to make coffee on crutches. He conceded defeat, allowing her to help him to a kitchen stool. As she moved around his kitchen, preparing coffee and finding bread for toast, Avery was struck by how domestic this felt, and how that thought both thrilled and terrified her. "About last night," Jason began, his voice careful. Avery's hands stilled on the coffee press. "Having regrets?" "Only about letting you sleep on the couch. You deserved better than that." She turned to face him, leaning against the counter. "I didn't exactly plan to fall asleep." "No, but I'm glad you did." His voice softened. "Waking up and seeing you there, it felt right. Terrifying, but right." "Terrifying seems to be our theme," Avery said, pouring coffee into 2 mugs she found in his cabinet. Each one probably cost more than her entire set at home. "Avery," something in his tone made her look up. "I need you to understand something. This, us, it's not going to be easy. I have good days, and bad days. Sometimes I can walk with a cane, sometimes I need the wheelchair. Sometimes the pain—" "Jason," she interrupted gently, "I know I'm not here because I think it's going to be easy." "Then why are you here?" The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. Avery thought about her grandmother, about all the times she'd helped her in and out of bed through good days and bad, about how love wasn't about convenience. "Because when I'm with you, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." She handed him his coffee. "Even if where I'm supposed to be is making breakfast for a stubborn ex-CEO who thinks crutches are optional kitchen accessories." He took a sip of coffee, hiding a smile. "You know, most women would run from this kind of complicated. Good thing I'm not most women." She checked her phone and grimaced. "Though I am going to be late for work if I don't leave soon. I could call you in sick," he offered, only half joking. "I still have some corporate influence. Tempting, but I have responsibilities, unlike some retired executives I know." "Temporary medical leave," he corrected. "And speaking of responsibilities," he hesitated, "I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon. They're going to discuss next steps, treatment options." Avery heard what he wasn't saying. "Would you like company?" Relief flickered across his face. "You don't have to." "I know." She stepped closer, running her hand along his jaw. "But I want to. I can swap shifts with Mackenzie. She owes me for covering her Valentine's Day. It might be a long appointment, and not particularly pleasant. Good thing I'm particularly patient." She kissed him softly, tasting coffee and possibility. "Text me the details, I'll meet you there." As she gathered her things to leave, Jason caught her hand. "Hey, thank you for staying, for understanding, for everything. Thank me after you survived today's lecture about proper crutch usage." But as she walked to the bus stop in the crisp morning air, Avery felt her own anxiety creeping in. This was moving fast, faster than her carefully planned life usually allowed. She pulled out her purple notebook, flipping to a fresh page. "Things I know. I'm falling for him. It's complicated. I'm terrified. I'm staying anyway." The bus arrived right on schedule, just like always. But for the first time in years, Avery's perfectly structured world felt wonderfully, terrifyingly off balance. At work, she moved through her morning routine on autopilot, her mind wandering to the afternoon ahead. Between customers, she texted her mother, "Remember when you told me I'd know love when it scared me more than being alone? I think I understand now." Her mother's response came quickly. "Baby girl, the best love stories aren't about feeling safe, they're about feeling brave." As she prepared another orange juice, Avery thought about bravery. About Jason fighting with his coffee maker rather than admit he needed help. About her own fear of letting someone past her carefully constructed walls. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jason. "Doctor's office. 2:30. Bringing crutches and wheelchair. Happy?" She smiled, typing back, "Progress. Though I noticed you didn't mention the cane. Baby steps, Miss Brooks. Some of us are still learning to walk here." The joke about his condition, the first he'd made, felt like a tiny victory. Maybe they were both learning to be brave in their own ways. Another customer approached, and Avery slipped her phone away. But her heart felt lighter, despite the uncertainty ahead, because maybe her mother was right. Maybe love wasn't about feeling safe. Maybe it was about finding someone worth being brave for, even if that someone was a stubborn ex-CEO who thought he could make coffee on crutches. The waiting room at Seattle Neurological Associates was designed to be soothing, with its muted blue walls and soft instrumental music. But Avery could feel the tension radiating from Jason as they sat side by side, waiting for his name to be called. True to his word, he'd brought both the wheelchair and crutches, though the latter remained stubbornly unused, propped against the wall beside them. She watched him scroll through emails on his phone, his CEO mask firmly in place. To anyone else, he might have looked perfectly calm, but Avery had learned to read the subtle signs, the slight twitch in his jaw, the way his fingers drummed silently against his thigh, the too-perfect posture that spoke of contained anxiety. "Want to hear something funny?" she asked, breaking his spiral of pretend productivity. He looked up, grateful for the distraction. "Always. This morning a businessman ordered our most expensive juice blend, then spent 5 minutes explaining to me why CEOs deserve their high salaries." She nudged his shoulder gently. "Reminded me of someone I know. Former CEO," he corrected, but she caught his slight smile. "And I hope I was never that condescending." "No, you just tried to make coffee on crutches instead." Before he could reply, a nurse appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Munro?" Jason's hand found Avery's, squeezing briefly before he released it to maneuver his wheelchair forward. She followed, noting how the medical staff addressed him directly, not her, a small respect she knew he appreciated. The examination room was bright and clinical, with charts of the human spine on the walls and a large window overlooking downtown Seattle. Dr. Richardson, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, entered with a tablet in hand. "Jason," she greeted warmly, then noticed Avery. "And you brought support today, that's new." "This is Avery," Jason said, and something in the way he spoke her name made Dr. Richardson's eyebrows rise slightly. "Nice to meet you, Avery. I'm glad you're here. Support systems are crucial in recovery." The doctor settled onto her stool, pulling up Jason's charts. "Speaking of recovery, let's talk about your progress." What followed was a detailed discussion of nerve regeneration rates, inflammation markers, and physical therapy milestones. Avery listened carefully, her accountant's mind automatically organizing the information into manageable pieces. She noticed how Jason's shoulders tensed when Dr. Richardson mentioned permanent limitations and lifestyle adjustments. "The good news," the doctor continued, "is that you're making progress. The bad news is that it's slower than we hoped. I'm recommending an additional surgery to reduce the pressure on your L4 vertebra." The word surgery fell like a stone into still water. Jason's hands gripped his wheelchair's arms, knuckles white. "What are the risks?" Avery asked when Jason remained silent. Dr. Richardson looked between them before answering. "Any spinal surgery carries risks. In this case, we're looking at potential nerve damage, infection risks, extended recovery time. But without it, the pressure could cause further deterioration. And with the surgery," Jason's voice was controlled, professional. "What's the best-case scenario?" "Best case, reduced pain, improved mobility. You might walk with just a cane. But Jason," her voice softened, "I need you to understand, you're not going to return to your previous level of function. This isn't about getting back to who you were. It's about optimizing who you are now." The words hung in the air, like smoke. Avery watched Jason process them, saw the exact moment his corporate facade cracked just slightly. "How long?" he asked. "For recovery? 3 to 6 months, minimum. You'll need full-time assistance for the first few weeks." Jason's jaw clenched. "I just got rid of the home health aide. You'll need to hire another one," Dr. Richardson said firmly. "This isn't optional, Jason. You'll need help with everything. Bathing, dressing, medication management." Avery felt him withdrawing, building walls even as they sat there. She wanted to reach for his hand but knew he needed this moment of processing. The rest of the appointment passed in a blur of scheduling details and prescription adjustments. When they finally left the office, Seattle's perpetual rain had started again, dropping steadily from a steel-gray sky. In the parking garage, Jason was silent as Avery helped him into his car. She'd driven them in his vehicle, having met him at his house earlier. Now sitting in the driver's seat, she waited. "You don't have to stay," he said finally, staring straight ahead. "This isn't what you signed up for." "What exactly do you think I signed up for?" "Not this." His laugh was bitter. "Not someone who needs surgery just to walk with a cane. Not months of recovery. Not a man who can't even—" He stopped, swallowing hard. "Jason, look at me." He didn't. "Jason Thomas Monroe, look at me right now." Something in her tone made him turn. In the dim light of the parking garage, his eyes were storm-dark with unshed tears. "Do you know what I signed up for?" Avery's voice was soft but firm. "I signed up for you. Not your walking ability, not your recovery timeline. You. You can't mean that. You don't know what it'll be like." "Actually, I do." She shifted in her seat to face him fully. "I watched my grandmother fight cancer for 2 years. I helped her shower, helped her dress, held her hair back when she was sick. Love isn't about convenience, Jason. It's about choosing someone every day, especially on the hard days." His breath caught at the word love. "Avery, I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly. "Unless you tell me that's what you want." "Is it?" He was quiet for so long, she thought he might not answer. Finally, so softly, she almost missed it. "No." "Good." She started the car, letting the engine's hum fill the silence. "Because I already swapped all my shifts for the next month, and Mackenzie would be really annoyed if I tried to take them back." Jason looked at her sharply. "You what?" "I'm not letting you hire another stranger to help you recover. I have experience, I'm organized, and I make excellent juice. I can't ask you to do that." "You're not asking. I'm offering." She pulled out of the parking space, navigating toward the exit. "Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't try cooking on crutches again." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You're incredible, you know that?" "I know. Now we're going to stop at my apartment so I can pack some things. Then we're going to your place to make a plan. Because if there's one thing you should know about me by now, it's that I love a good plan." As they drove through Seattle's rain-slicked streets, Avery felt Jason watching her. She knew this wouldn't be easy. Knew there would be days when pain made him push her away, when pride made him difficult, when both of them would question everything. But she also knew, with a certainty that surprised her, that he was worth it. Worth the complicated mornings and the difficult decisions. Worth the fear and the uncertainty. Because sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it's about showing up in hospital waiting rooms, about learning to help without hurting pride, about choosing someone even when, especially when, life gets messy. And if there was one thing Avery Brooks was learning, it was that the messiest parts of life often held the most beauty, even if that beauty came with a wheelchair, a surgery schedule, and a stubborn man who was finally slowly learning to let someone in. Avery had always believed that love revealed itself in small moments. In her first week living at Jason's house, she learned just how true that was. Love was in the way she arranged his medications in perfect rows, color-coded by time of day, in how he insisted on having her favorite tea stocked in the kitchen, even on days when he could barely get out of bed, in the silent understanding that passed between them when pride and pain collided. But love, she was learning, could also be frustrating as hell. "Jason," she called from the kitchen, where she was preparing his morning medication. "Your physical therapist will be here in 20 minutes. Do you need help getting ready?" "I've got it," came his reply, followed by a muffled thud and what sounded suspiciously like cursing. Avery counted to 10 slowly, remembering her grandmother's lessons about patience. The past week had been a dance of learning boundaries. When to help, when to step back, when to push, when to pretend she hadn't heard him struggling. She finished arranging his pills and moved to the living room, where she found him attempting to change his shirt, his movements stiff and painful. Yesterday had been a bad day, the pain keeping him in bed most of the afternoon. Today, he seemed determined to make up for it by pushing himself twice as hard. "The surgery is in 3 days, she reminded him gently. "Maybe save the acrobatics for after recovery." Jason shot her a look that was part frustration, part embarrassment. "I need to be able to do this myself, and you will. But right now," she moved closer, holding out her hands. "Right now you need to let me help so you don't throw your back out before Dr. Richardson has a chance to fix it." For a moment, she thought he would refuse. His jaw had that stubborn set she'd come to recognize. But then his shoulders slumped slightly and he nodded. As she helped him with his shirt, her movements efficient but gentle, she felt the tension in his muscles. "Talk to me," she said softly. "About what?" "Whatever's going on in that complicated head of yours." He was quiet as she finished helping him dress, but she waited. One thing she'd learned about Jason Monroe, silence was often just his way of gathering thoughts. "I used to give presentations to rooms full of investors," he said finally, "making million-dollar decisions over breakfast. Now I can't even put on a damn shirt without help." "Temporary situation," she reminded him, smoothing his collar. "And for what it's worth, you still intimidate the hell out of the physical therapist." That earned her a small smile. "Mason, he's afraid of everyone." "Not true. He likes me." "Everyone likes you." Jason caught her hand as she started to step back. "Why are you still here, Ave?" The question caught her off guard. "What do you mean? You could be focusing on your accounting classes, building your career. Instead, you're here, counting pills and helping an ex-CEO get dressed." Avery studied him for a moment, seeing past the self-deprecation to the real fear underneath. "Remember last week, when I was stressed about my midterm? What did you do?" He looked confused by the change in subject. "I just helped you study. For 4 hours. While in pain. You quizzed me on accounting principles and made me explain amortization schedules until I could recite them in my sleep." She stepped closer, resting her hands on his chest. "That's why I'm here. Because you see me. Not just the caregiver. Not just the juice stand girl. Me." Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Mason arriving for therapy. But as Avery turned to answer it, Jason caught her wrist. "Hey," he said softly. "I see you because you're impossible to miss." The therapy session was brutal. Mason was gentle but firm, pushing Jason through exercises that left him pale and sweating. Avery stayed nearby, pretending to study her accounting textbook while actually watching every grimace, every determined push through pain. When Mason finally left, Jason was exhausted. Avery helped him to the couch, arranging pillows with practiced ease. "I should check my work emails," he mumbled, even as his eyes were closing. "The only thing you should check is the inside of your eyelids." She pulled a light blanket over him. "Sleep, I'll wake you for medication in 2 hours." But as she turned to leave, he caught her hand. "Stay? Just stay close?" Something in her chest tightened at the request. It was the first time he'd openly asked for comfort, not just assistance. Without a word, she settled into the armchair next to the couch, her accounting book in her lap. "Tell me about your classes," he said sleepily. "About what you'll do when you have your own firm." So she did. She told him about her dreams of helping women understand their finances, of teaching financial independence as a form of freedom. She talked until his breathing evened out, until the pain lines around his eyes softened in sleep. Only then did she allow herself to really look at him, at the proud man learning humility the hard way, at the CEO becoming something else, something perhaps more real, more human. Her phone buzzed softly. A text from her mother. "How are you holding up, baby girl?" Avery looked at Jason's sleeping form, at the medication schedule on the coffee table, at her accounting book filled with sticky notes in his handwriting, little annotations and questions he'd added while helping her study. "I'm okay," she typed back. "It's hard sometimes, but worth it." "Love usually is," came her mother's reply. Later that evening, after helping Jason with his evening routine and settling him in bed, Avery sat in the kitchen with her purple notebook and a cup of chamomile tea. Under the soft kitchen lights, she wrote, "Things I've learned this week. Strength isn't always about standing alone. Pride can heal or hurt, depending on how you hold it. Love is in the small moments between struggle and grace. Sometimes helping means knowing when to step back. I'm exactly where I need to be." Outside, Seattle's rain tapped gentle rhythms on the windows. Inside, in this space between caregiver and lover, between independence and need, between strength and pride, Avery Brooks was learning that love wasn't just about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it was about counting pills and correcting accounting homework, about knowing when to push and when to be patient, about holding space for someone's struggle while loving them through it. And sometimes, just sometimes, it was about staying close while someone slept, guarding their vulnerability like the precious gift it was. Even if that someone was a stubborn ex-CEO who still checked work emails in his sleep. Hospitals had their own particular silence, Avery thought. Not true quiet, but a hushed intensity that made every sound feel significant. The squeak of nurses' shoes on linoleum, the distant ding of elevators, the steady beep of monitors marking time in electronic heartbeats. She sat in the surgical waiting room of Swedish Medical Center, her purple notebook open, but empty in her lap. For once, she couldn't think of what to write. How did you put words to the feeling of watching someone you love being wheeled away into an operating room? Their last conscious words to you are trying to be brave. "See you on the other side, Miss Brooks." Her mother's voice came through her phone's speaker, soft and understanding. "Baby girl, you still there?" "Yeah," Avery replied, realizing she'd been silent too long. "Just waiting. Your grandmother always said waiting rooms were where faith goes to be tested." A pause. "Have you called his family?" Avery's hand tightened on her phone. "He doesn't want them here. Says he doesn't need his parents hovering or his sister's pity." She didn't mention the real reason, that Jason couldn't bear the thought of his family seeing him this vulnerable, this human. And his ex-wife? "Mom, I'm just asking, baby. These situations can complicate things." Avery thought of the divorce papers she'd found while organizing Jason's office last week, the final signatures still fresh enough to smudge. Another piece of his old life falling away, just as his new one hung in the balance. "Catherine's in Europe," she said finally. "Besides, they're really done. Have been for a while, according to Jason. The surgery just sped up the paperwork." A nurse approached with a clipboard and a practiced smile. "Ms. Brooks, we need a few more signatures for Mr. Monroe's file. Mom, I have to go. I'll call you when he's out." "I'll be praying, baby, and Avery, remember to breathe." After handling the paperwork, her signature now legally authorized to make decisions thanks to papers Jason had insisted on filing last week, Avery found herself pacing the waiting room, 4 hours into what could be a 6-hour surgery, and time seemed to move like cold honey. Her phone buzzed, a text from Mackenzie at the juice stand. "How's our favorite grumpy CEO doing?" Despite her anxiety, Avery smiled. Her co-workers had adopted Jason as a sort of mascot after he'd started visiting her at work, his dry humor and hidden kindness winning them over, despite his occasional corporate brusqueness. Still in surgery, And he'd remind you he's an ex-CEO. Details. Want me to bring you decent coffee? Hospital brew is basically brown sadness. I'm okay, but thank you. She wasn't okay, not really. But this was her vigil to keep, her worry to carry, just like Jason carried his pride and his pain, alone until someone insisted otherwise. The surgery update board changed. Monroe, J., in recovery. Avery's heart jumped. 20 minutes later, Dr. Richardson appeared, still in surgical scrubs but smiling. It went well, she said before Avery could ask. We got good decompression of the nerve roots. There was more inflammation than we expected, but we managed it. He's going to be in significant pain for a while, but the long-term prognosis is positive. Define significant, Avery said, her caregiver instincts kicking in. The first week will be rough. He'll need constant care, pain management, careful monitoring. Are you sure you don't want us to arrange a professional nurse? I'm sure. Avery thought of Jason's face when she'd suggested it, that mixture of panic and pride. When can I see him? He's in post-op now. Give us 30 minutes to get him settled in a room. But Avery, Dr. Richardson's voice softened, he's going to be different for a while. Pain and medication can change people. Don't take anything he says too personally. Avery nodded, remembering her grandmother's bad days, when pain had turned her loving wisdom into sharp edges and bitter words. I understand. Those 30 minutes stretched like years. When a nurse finally led her to Jason's room, Avery had to remind herself to breathe. He lay still against white hospital sheets, looking smaller somehow without his usual intensity. Various monitors beeped steadily, marking his journey back to consciousness. She settled into the chair beside his bed, taking his hand carefully around the IV lines. His skin was cool, and she rubbed gentle circles with her thumb, the way she'd seen him do when his fingers got stiff from nerve pain. Slowly, his eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then finding her face. Hey there, Mr. Monroe, she said softly. He blinked slowly, fighting through layers of anesthesia. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Did you organize my surgery into color-coded sections? A laugh caught in Avery's throat, coming out somewhere between a chuckle and a sob. Not this time, but I did alphabetize your get-well cards. Liar, he mumbled. Haven't told anyone. True, but I would have if you had. His fingers tightened slightly around hers, the smallest gesture, but it meant everything. Then his face contorted in pain, and the real work began. The next 12 hours were a blur of medication timing, nurse check-ins, and careful position adjustments. Jason drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes clear and present, sometimes lost in a haze of pain and painkillers. During one lucid moment, as Avery helped him take small sips of water, he looked at her with unusual intensity. You should go home, he said. Get some rest. I am home. The words came naturally, surprising them both. Pain creased his forehead, but he pushed through it. I mean it. I can't be good company right now. Good thing I didn't fall in love with you for your conversational skills. She adjusted his pillows with practiced ease. Though your sarcasm was a bonus. Love. His voice was small, almost afraid. Yes, you brilliant, stubborn man. Love. She smoothed his hair back from his forehead. Now stop talking and rest. We can discuss your emotional unavailability when you're not on quite so many narcotics. A ghost of his usual smirk touched his lips. Bossy. You have no idea. As night settled over Seattle, painting the hospital windows in city lights and stars, Avery maintained her vigil. She dozed occasionally in the uncomfortable chair, one hand always touching Jason's arm or hand, a reminder that he wasn't alone. During one quiet moment, when pain medication had granted him peaceful sleep, she finally opened her purple notebook and wrote, "Things pain can't touch. The way he checks my accounting work, even when exhausted. How he remembers exactly how I take my tea. The strength it takes to let someone see you weak. The sound of his laugh when he forgets to be careful. This feeling that fills my chest when he's near. The certainty that this is exactly where I belong." Outside the hospital windows, Seattle continued its eternal dance of lights and shadows. Inside room 412, between beeping monitors and whispered nurse checks, love did what it did best. It stayed. Because sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it's about holding someone's hand through pain, about watching them sleep in hospital light, about being there when they wake, again and again, each time a little stronger, a little more themselves. Even if that someone is a stubbornly independent ex-CEO who tries to organize his own recovery schedule while still under anesthesia. 2 weeks after surgery, Avery was learning that recovery wasn't a straight line. It was more like a tangle of Christmas lights, moments of brightness mixed with knots of frustration, all wrapped in a mess of emotions neither of them quite knew how to untangle. That particular morning started with promise. Jason had managed to sleep for 4 hours straight, the longest stretch since coming home from the hospital. Avery had just finished organizing his morning medications when she heard it, the unmistakable sound of someone trying to get out of bed without help. She was moving before she could think, reaching the bedroom just as Jason's legs buckled. Only her quick reaction and his death grip on the bedpost kept him from hitting the floor. "What?" she said, carefully helping him back to the bed. "Do you think you're doing?" "I needed to use the bathroom." His voice was tight with pain and something else, humiliation. "I didn't want to wake you, because falling and undoing your surgery would have been so much better." The words came out sharper than she intended, sharpened by fear and lack of sleep. Jason's face closed off, the way it did when corporate mask met private pain. "I'm not a child, Avery." "Then stop acting like one." She ran a hand through her hair, exhaustion making her honest. "Do you have any idea what it does to me, seeing you risk everything because you're too proud to ask for help? Do you have any idea what it does to me, having to ask for help to use my own damn bathroom?" They stared at each other across the space between them, a space that suddenly felt wider than the few feet it was. Avery saw the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly from pain and effort. Jason saw the worry lines around her mouth, the fatigue that made her usually graceful movements slightly sluggish. "I can't keep watching you hurt yourself," she said finally, softly, "and I can't keep watching you put your life on hold for mine." He looked away, toward the window where Seattle's skyline stretched gray and distant. "You missed another accounting class yesterday." "I'll catch up." "That's not the point, Avy." "Then what is the point, Jason? Because from where I'm standing it looks like you're trying to push me away." His silence was answer enough. Avery stepped back, professional mask sliding into place. "Your medication is on the kitchen counter. I'll help you to the bathroom, then I need to make some calls." She helped him with mechanical efficiency, ignoring the way his hands shook, the way he wouldn't meet her eyes. Once he was settled back in bed, she grabbed her purple notebook and car keys. "Where are you going?" he asked, and she heard the fear under the attempt at indifference. "To think, something we both need to do." She made it to her car before the tears came. Muscle memory took her to Pike Place Market, to the same coffee shop where she used to study, before her life became measured in medication schedules and physical therapy appointments. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. "Baby girl, you missed our morning call. Everything okay?" Avery stared at the message, thinking about okayness and its many definitions. Finally, she hit dial. "He's pushing me away," she said when her mother answered. "Mm-hmm." Her mother's hum was knowing. "And are you letting him?" "I don't know." Avery watched steam rise from her untouched coffee. "Maybe he's right. Maybe this is too much. I am missing classes, falling behind." "Let me tell you something about your grandmother," her mother interrupted. "When Daddy got sick, everyone told her to put him in a home, said she was sacrificing too much, putting her life on hold. You know what she told them?" "What?" "She said, life isn't what happens when everything's easy. Life is what happens in the spaces between what we want and what we get." Then she looked them dead in the eye and said, "And I get to choose what I do with those spaces." Avery touched her locket, feeling her grandmother's presence. "I miss her. I know, baby. But she taught you everything you need to know about love, about staying when it's hard, about choosing someone every day, especially when they're trying not to be chosen." "Jason's not Grandpa, Mom. He might not want to be chosen." "No, he's not Daddy. He's a proud man learning humility the hard way." Sound familiar? Avery thought about her grandmother's early days with cancer, how she'd raged against needing help, against being seen as weak, how love had meant standing firm in the face of that rage, holding space for the fear beneath it. "I should get back," she said finally. "His next medication is due soon." "Avery?" Her mother's voice softened. "Remember what Mama always said about pride. It's just fear wearing a fancy suit. And what do we do with fear? We look it in the eye and love it anyway." After hanging up, Avery opened her purple notebook, its pages now worn with weeks of notes and worries and hopes. "Things I know for sure. Love isn't about being needed. It's about choosing to stay even when they push you away. Sometimes the bravest thing is to be still and steady. Pride and fear speak the same language. I'm not going anywhere." She drove back to Jason's house, their house, if she was honest with herself, and found him where she'd left him, but with one difference. On his lap was a stack of her accounting textbooks, post-it notes marking various pages. "I've been an ass," he said before she could speak. "Yes. I thought," he swallowed hard, "I thought if I pushed hard enough, you'd choose yourself over this." He gestured to himself, to the medical equipment, to the evidence of dependency he still couldn't fully accept. Avery set her keys down and perched on the edge of the bed. "Here's the thing about choices, Jason. They're mine to make. And I choose this, I choose you. Even when you're being impossible, even when you try to make my choices for me. Why? Because I love you, you impossible man. And because someone once taught me that the best things in life should terrify us a little." His hand found hers, trembling slightly. "I'm terrified all the time." "I know." She squeezed his fingers gently. "But here's the good news. You don't have to be terrified alone." "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "How to be less than I was." "You're not less, you're different, we're different, and maybe that's okay." He tugged her closer until she was sitting beside him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I love you," he said quietly, "even when I'm terrible at showing it. Good thing I'm excellent at reading between the lines." Outside, Seattle's eternal rain began to fall, drawing patterns on the windows like tears or prayers or promises. Inside, in the space between pride and surrender, between fear and love, two people held onto each other, choosing again what they'd chosen every day since that first meeting in an airport terminal. Because sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. Sometimes it's about staying when everything says run, about loving someone through their worst fears, their deepest pride, their hardest battles. Even if that someone is a stubborn ex-CEO who's finally slowly learning that needing help doesn't make you weak, it just makes you human. 3 months after surgery, on a rare sunny Seattle morning, Avery woke to an empty bed and the sound of quiet cursing from the kitchen. She lay still for a moment, listening to the familiar cadence of Jason's movements, the soft tap of his cane, the careful shuffle of feet still learning new rhythms, the gentle domestic symphony of someone trying very hard to be quiet and mostly failing. The scent of coffee and something burning drifted through the air. "Please don't be trying to cook," she muttered, sliding out of bed. She grabbed her robe, hanging next to his on the door, one of the many small ways their lives had intertwined, and padded toward the kitchen. She found Jason standing at the stove, leaning on his cane, attempting to salvage what looked like severely overdone pancakes. Her heart did that familiar flutter at the sight of him in sleep pants and a soft gray t-shirt, his hair still mussed from sleep. 3 months of recovery had changed him. He was leaner, but there was a new strength in how he held himself, an earned confidence different from his old corporate armor. "You know," she said, making him jump slightly, "when I said you were getting stronger, I didn't mean you should immediately try to burn down the kitchen." He turned, and something in his expression made her pause. There was a nervousness there, an intensity that didn't match burnt breakfast. "I wanted to make you breakfast in bed," he admitted, "though I'm beginning to suspect that might have been slightly ambitious." "Slightly?" She moved to turn off the stove before the smoke detector got any ideas. "What's the occasion?" Instead of answering, he nodded toward her usual spot at the kitchen island, where her purple notebook lay open. "Read it." Avery approached cautiously, recognizing the notebook, but not the handwriting that filled its latest page. Jason's precise script, usually so controlled, looked almost nervous. "Things I need you to know. You color-code my world in the best possible ways. Your strength has taught me what real courage looks like. I'm better with you, even when I'm at my worst. I love watching you study, especially when you talk to your textbooks. I want to spend the rest of my life learning how to deserve you. I can't kneel right now, but I'm hoping you'll say yes anyway." Her heart stopped, then started again in double time. Slowly she turned. Jason stood behind her, supporting himself on his cane with one hand while the other held out a small velvet box. Inside nestled a ring, elegant and understated, a single diamond held in a setting that looked like intertwined branches. "I had this whole speech planned," he said softly, "about how you've taught me that strength isn't about standing alone, it's about knowing who to lean on, about how you make me brave enough to be vulnerable, whole enough to be broken, strong enough to need help." His voice wavered slightly. "But standing is harder than I anticipated, so I'm going to cut to the chase. Avery Michelle Brooks, will you marry me?" Avery looked at the man before her, this proud, complicated, wonderful man who had fought so hard to learn how to love himself as he was, not as he used to be. who still worked too hard at physical therapy, but had learned to ask for help when the pain got bad, who helped her study for accounting exams even on his worst days. "You know," she said, voice thick with emotion, "most people just make reservations at a nice restaurant. When have we ever done anything the normal way?" He smiled, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the fear beneath the hope. She stepped closer, close enough to rest her hands on his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. "Yes, yes, yes, I will marry you, you impossible man." She smiled through tears she hadn't realized were falling. "Though we should probably discuss your tendency to attempt dangerous cooking experiments without supervision." His laugh was shaky with relief as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the morning light like captured stars. "I may have had some help with the size," he admitted. "Your mother is surprisingly good at keeping secrets." "You called my mom?" "I did everything by the book. Called your mother, got her blessing, had a long conversation about family traditions and the importance of letting love win even when pride gets in the way." His free hand came up to cup her cheek. "I even practiced standing long enough to do this properly, though that part didn't quite work out as planned." Avery turned her face to kiss his palm. "I think it worked out exactly as it was supposed to." He pulled her closer, careful of his balance. "I love you, Miss Brooks, even when I'm terrible at showing it." "Good thing I'm excellent at reading between the lines, Mr. Monroe." Their kiss tasted like coffee and burnt pancakes and promises. When they finally parted, Jason rested his forehead against hers. "I should warn you," he said, "I'm still not great at asking for help. Still learning how to be this new version of myself. And I should warn you, I'm still going to color-code everything in our life together and make you drink healthy juice and force you to rest when you push too hard." "Sounds perfect." A comfortable silence settled around them, broken only by the gentle tap of rain that had started outside, Seattle's way of blessing the moment. "We should probably clean up the kitchen," Avery said eventually, eyeing the disaster zone that was meant to be breakfast. "Probably." Jason's thumb traced circles on her hand, playing with the new ring. "Or we could order breakfast and you could tell me more about these color-coding plans for our future." Counter-proposal. "We order breakfast, and you tell me how you managed to convince my mother not to spoil the surprise." "Deal." He smiled, that real smile that still made her heart skip. "Though I should mention she did have one condition." "Oh?" "We have to name our first daughter Dorothy." Avery's breath caught at the casual mention of their future, of children, of a life stretching out before them full of possibilities they'd create together. "Bold of you to assume I'm not going to color-code our children," she managed, blinking back happy tears. "I'm counting on it." Later, after they'd ordered breakfast and cleaned up the evidence of Jason's culinary adventure, they sat on their deck overlooking the Sound. The morning sun painted everything in shades of possibility, and Avery couldn't stop looking at her ring, at how right it felt. "Happy?" Jason asked softly, his hand finding hers. She thought about their journey, from a chance meeting in an airport to this moment, about all the struggles and triumphs, the hard days and the beautiful ones, about how love wasn't just about perfect moments, but about choosing someone every day, especially on the imperfect ones. "Perfect," she said, and meant it, because sometimes love isn't about grand gestures or flawless execution. Sometimes it's about burnt pancakes and morning light, about learning to need and be needed, about building a life in the spaces between who we were and who we're becoming. Even if that life includes a stubborn ex-CEO who still can't cook, but has finally beautifully learned how to love without limits. 1 year later, the small accounting office in downtown Seattle wasn't what most people would call remarkable, but to Avery Monroe Brooks, the modest space with its neat desk and color-coded filing system was everything she'd dreamed of. The sign on the door read, "Brooks Financial Services, empowering women through financial independence," and below it, in smaller letters, "By appointment only." She sat at her desk, adding final notes to a client's file, when a familiar tap of a cane made her look up. Jason stood in the doorway, leaning more for show than necessity these days. A year of determined physical therapy had yielded results that surprised even Dr. Richardson. While he would never return to his pre-surgery mobility, he had found a new way of moving through the world. Slower, perhaps, but with a grace that spoke of hard-won self-acceptance. "Ready for lunch, Mrs. Monroe Brooks?" He smiled, using her new name with the same quiet joy he had since their small, intimate wedding 3 months ago. Almost. She closed the file, noting how her grandmother's locket now shared space with her wedding ring. 2 circles of love connecting past to present. Just finishing up with Maria's account. She's finally leaving her toxic marriage and I wanted to make sure her financial plan is solid. Jason's expression softened with understanding. Another life changed by the Brooks effect. By financial education, she corrected, but smiled. Though I did use your negotiation tactics when helping her with the divorce settlement. Glad to know my corporate shark days are still good for something. Avery stood, gathering her things. The office walls held 2 framed photos. One of her grandmother, smiling fierce and proud, the other from their wedding day. In it, they were caught in a moment of pure joy. Jason standing tall with minimal support, Avery laughing at something he'd whispered in her ear, both of them radiant with a love that had grown stronger through every challenge. Speaking of corporate days, she said, locking up, how was the consulting call? After months of recovery and reflection, Jason had found a new purpose. Instead of running hotels, he now advised companies on inclusive workplace policies, particularly regarding employees with disabilities. His personal experience had transformed into a mission to change corporate culture from within. Productive, though I may have scared the HR director when I rolled into the video call in my wheelchair. His eyes crinkled with amusement. Apparently they expected the former CEO to be more traditionally executive. Did you give them your accessibility is profitability speech? Of course. Right after showing them the statistics you helped me compile. They made their way to their favorite cafe, the same one where they'd had their first real date. The staff knew them now, had watched their story unfold in weekly visits and quiet conversations. Your usual table's ready, the hostess said with a warm smile, leading them to their corner spot. As they settled in, Avery noticed Jason watching her with an intensity that usually meant he was working up to something. What? She asked, recognizing his expression. I had an interesting call with your mother this morning. Avery's heart did a familiar flutter. Oh? She reminded me that we promised to name our first daughter Dorothy. He reached across the table, taking her hand. And then she asked when we might be fulfilling that promise. Did she now? Avery tried to keep her voice steady, but a smile tugged at her lips. Which made me think, maybe it's time to start color-coding a new chapter. Avery squeezed his hand, thinking of the pregnancy test she'd taken that morning, the one whose positive result was currently tucked safely in her purple notebook. She'd been waiting for the right moment to tell him. Actually, she said softly, I may have already started that chapter's organizational system. Jason's eyes widened as her meaning sank in. Are you? She nodded, tears blurring her vision as she watched joy spread across his face. How long have you known? Just this morning. I was going to tell you tonight, but she laughed softly. Apparently the universe had other plans. Jason was quiet for a moment, processing. Then, please tell me you haven't already color-coded the next 9 months. Of course I have. She pulled out her newest notebook, pale yellow this time, complete with trimester-specific tabs and a delivery day countdown. His laugh was warm and full of love. I wouldn't expect anything less. He squeezed her hand. Think your grandmother would approve of all of this? Avery touched her locket with her free hand, feeling the weight of legacy and love. She always said life's greatest adventures come in unexpected packages. She smiled. I think an ex-CEO with a cane and a penchant for burning breakfast qualifies as unexpected, and the adventure part is just beginning. Outside, Seattle's rain had given way to rare sunshine, painting the world in possibilities. Inside, 2 people who had found love in life's unexpected turns held hands across a cafe table, planning their next chapter. Because sometimes love isn't about perfect timing or flawless plans. Sometimes it's about color-coded notebooks and careful steps forward, about building a future from the pieces of past dreams, about choosing each other again and again through every season of life. Even if those seasons include a stubborn ex-CEO turned disability advocate who still can't cook but has mastered the art of loving completely, and a determined financial advisor who color-codes everything but has learned that the best parts of life can't be organized in neat categories. Together, they had written a love story that wasn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It was about small victories and quiet strength, about learning to dance in life's rain and sunshine alike. And now they were ready to start a new chapter, one that would be written in baby steps and midnight feedings, in first words and wobbly walks, in all the beautiful, messy, perfectly imperfect moments that make up a life built on love. A life that started with a simple question in an airport terminal and led to this moment, full of sunshine and possibility, where the future stretched out before them like blank pages waiting to be filled. together. The end. Your participation in the channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Would you have the courage to love someone through their hardest battles, even when they try to push you away? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story,